The day of the divorce, she collapsed. The baby? His exact copy. The silence between them was deafening. The civil registry had that unbearable smell of old paper and fresh ink, a bureaucratic aroma that had nothing to do with the story they had just closed. Clara and Daniel sat opposite each other, separated by a cold table and a stack of papers that sealed what was once love. She held the pen tightly, not from indecision, but to keep her fingers from trembling. Her name was already there, printed in black ink, waiting only for the last signature. Daniel's. He, for his part, maintained his immobile expression, as he always did. His features rigid, his dark eyes hiding any trace of emotion. He took the pen with the precision of someone accustomed to definitive decisions. The stroke on the paper was quick, firm, without hesitation. No tears were shed, no protest or last-ditch attempt to fix things. Just a discreet, farewell gesture. Clara felt the weight in her chest, not of regret, but of exhaustion. It wasn't just the divorce. It was the months of weariness, the sleepless nights, the effort to maintain her dignity intact while everything around her crumbled. And now, there was nothing left to hold on to. She picked up the documents with stiff fingers and stood up. The movement was small, insignificant, but inside her, something broke. The room spun. First, a sharp ringing in her ears. Then, darkness. The impact wasn't hard, but the sound of her body hitting the floor made Daniel's world collapse. He was by her side before anyone else could react. His voice, always so controlled, broke into panic. "Clara! Clara! Talk to me!" She didn't respond. Her face was pale, her lips parted as if trying to breathe. Time seemed to drag as the registry employees ran, voices mingling in a distant echo. But Daniel only saw Clara. He only heard the sound of his own heart beating erratically in his chest. "Call an ambulance!" His voice was a roar. The next few minutes were a blur of sirens and red lights reflecting in the glass of the buildings. Daniel didn't let go of her hand for a second. Even unconscious, Clara's skin was warm. Is she alive? He didn't know why that mattered so much. He didn't know why, after signing those papers, feeling her weak pulse beneath his fingers caused him a desperation he hadn't felt in a long time. But then, at the hospital, everything changed. The smell of antiseptic and the monotonous sound of monitors arrived before her eyes opened. Clara blinked against the white light of the room and felt the world spin slightly. The white ceiling, the pale walls, all so sterile, so empty. And then she saw him. Daniel was there. The impeccable suit from a few hours ago was now wrinkled, his tie knot loose. But what really caught her attention were his eyes. He looked at her as if he had seen a ghost, as if he were lost. Before Clara could say anything, the door opened, and a doctor entered. The man held a folder, his expression overly professional for what he was about to say. "Mrs. Davies, we have your test results." She forced herself to pay attention. "Your fainting spell was caused by a drop in blood pressure. Something common, considering your condition." Clara frowned. "My condition?" The doctor paused, as if expecting her to already know. But she didn't. "Congratulations, you're pregnant. 3 months. The silence that followed was absolute. Clara blinked. Her mind raced in 1,000 directions, trying to process the words, looking for some flaw in the logic, some explanation that wasn't that. Pregnant. She was pregnant. And when her gaze finally met Daniel's, she knew that nothing would ever be the same. He wasn't breathing. His eyes, which always hid everything, were now open in a way she had never seen before. For the first time in his life, Daniel was completely lost. The end of them had become the beginning of something much bigger. Clara felt the air weigh heavily around her. The doctor's words still floated in the silence of the room, as if time had refused to move forward from the moment they were spoken. Pregnant. She didn't know why that hit her with such force. It wasn't as if she had never considered the possibility. There were symptoms she ignored. Tiredness she attributed to the stress of the divorce. Nausea she treated as anxiety. Everything made sense now. But knowing was different from feeling. And in that instant, she felt the impact like an electric shock piercing every fiber of her body. Daniel was still there, standing, not moving a muscle. His eyes fixed on her, as if waiting for a reaction, a confirmation, anything that would help him process the new reality. But Clara had no answers. She averted her gaze, fixing it on a spot on the white sheet. She needed something solid, something that wouldn't move beneath her feet. This doesn't change anything. The words came out before she could contain them. Cold, firm, a barrier she tried to raise between herself and the confusion expanding within her. But Daniel noticed. He always noticed. The slight tremor in her voice, the way her hands, resting on the sheet, were slightly clenched. He took a step forward. Clara felt his energy invade the space between them. The woody, familiar perfume, a scent she knew better than she cared to. He was always there, on her skin, in her sheets, in the moments when they were still a couple, and she allowed herself to believe it could be forever. But now, she had to maintain control. "This is our child, Clara." His voice lacked its usual firmness. It wasn't an argument. It wasn't an order. It was a fact. One that carried the weight of everything they had lost, and of what, somehow, still existed between them. Clara looked up. The clash between them was palpable. Daniel didn't seem like the same man who signed those papers at the civil registry a few hours earlier. That man was cold, distant, as if nothing could touch him. But this one, standing before her, had a face marked by the impact of the news. Dark eyes, laden with something she didn't want to decipher. Because if she looked too long, perhaps she would find vestiges of the love she was trying to bury. She breathed slowly, tasting the metallic flavor of uncertainty on her tongue. "I don't need you for this, Daniel." She saw him blink, as if the phrase had been an unexpected blow. "Don't be ridiculous." The answer came sharp, cutting. But the anger wasn't in his voice. It was somewhere else, deeper, more dangerous. She refused to back down. "Ridiculous? For not wanting you to interfere in my life? In your life?" He let out a short, incredulous laugh. "This isn't just about you, Clara." She gritted her teeth. "Oh no, because it seems that until a few minutes ago, none of this existed for you. You signed those papers, Daniel. I'm no longer your wife." He leaned slightly forward, narrowing the distance between them. "But I'm still the father of this child." Clara felt her heart race, but she kept her face impassive. She wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, an impatient gesture she knew well. He was fighting against something within himself. "Do you really think you can exclude me from this?" She averted her gaze. "The truth? I don't know." She didn't know how to deal with it. She didn't know how to move forward without feeling the weight of the past pressing on her shoulders. I need time." It was the first truly sincere thing she said since the impact of that news hit her. He was silent for a moment, watching her as if trying to decipher every thought she couldn't yet organize. "I'm not going anywhere, Clara." She closed her eyes. That was what she feared, because no matter how much she tried to deny it, a part of her wanted to believe he was telling the truth. And that part was too dangerous to be heard. Clara averted her gaze, feeling the suffocating weight of Daniel's presence in the room. He was still there, watching her with that intensity that always left her vulnerable. But now, there was no room for vulnerability, not after everything they had been through. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to find a trace of calm within the whirlwind forming in her mind. But all she found was the echo of a past that had never completely left her. Their story was never ordinary. At first, it seemed invincible. The first encounter was by chance, one of those moments that destiny orchestrates with surgical precision. Clara was in Paris for a conference. Daniel was there for a business meeting. Two strangers in a foreign city, united by chance and by the undeniable spark that arose as soon as their eyes met. He was confident, charming in a way that wasn't limited to words. There was something in the way he looked at her, as if he saw something in her that no one else saw. Clara was never one to act on impulse, but that night, when Daniel invited her to dinner, she accepted without hesitation. Paris was the beginning. They were nights in dimly lit restaurants, whispered conversations about dreams and ambitions, murmured promises between sheets. Clara had never felt anything like it before. The world seemed more vibrant when she was with him, more intense. And Daniel made her feel alive in a way no one else had. When they returned home, it wasn't long before everything became even more serious. The courtship quickly evolved into an engagement, and in a short time, into a marriage that, at first glance, seemed perfect. But perfection was an illusion. The first signs of wear came silently, like small cracks in a wall that, from a distance, still seemed intact. Daniel had always been a man of insatiable ambition. He didn't just want the best. He demanded the best. He was meticulous, strategic, determined to build an empire that would be unbreakable. And at first, Clara admired that in him. But she soon realized that his ambition consumed everything around him, including her. Nights, once filled with long dinners and laughter, became solitary. Daniel spent more time in meetings than at home. When he returned, it was too late for any meaningful conversation. Silence began to grow between them, occupying the space that was once filled with desire, laughter, and love. Clara tried to convince herself that it was just a phase, that everything would return to normal. But then came the demands. Daniel was never the type to raise his voice. He never explicitly forbade anything. But there was always a comment, a suggestion, a look that said more than words. You don't need to work anymore. I can give you everything. This dress is a bit daring, don't you think? I don't think it's a good idea for you to travel alone. What will people think? At first, they were small concessions, nothing that seemed significant enough to be a problem. But, little by little, she realized that she was disappearing within the marriage. Invitations to events became rarer. Outings with friends became a source of veiled arguments. Clara no longer recognized the woman she saw in the mirror. And when she tried to talk about it, when she gathered the courage to tell Daniel that she felt suffocated, that she needed space for herself, he simply didn't listen. That's just in your head, Clara. I only want what's best for you. The best. What Daniel never understood was that the best for her was not what he thought was right. The first time she asked for time, Daniel laughed. He actually laughed, as if the idea were absurd. You're being dramatic. The second time, he was silent for a few seconds before simply changing the subject. And the third time, when Clara could no longer breathe within the marriage, he looked at her with disbelief. I don't know what else you need. I've given you everything. Everything except freedom, except choice, except the feeling that she still owned her own life. That's how their love was lost, not in a big scandal, not in a devastating betrayal, but in the slow, irreversible erosion of a marriage that stopped being a home. And now, there, in the hospital, forced to face the man she once loved more than anything. Clara felt as if she were back in that moment. The past infiltrated the present like a ghost that refused to disappear. Daniel was no longer her husband. He no longer had control over her. But somehow, he still had power over her feelings, and that terrified her. She breathed slowly, trying to keep her voice firm. "You can want to be part of this, Daniel, but I don't know if I want you near me." He didn't blink. "Do you still hate me that much?" Clara pressed her lips together. "Hate you? I don't hate you, Daniel. The problem is precisely that." For a moment, he seemed confused, but then something gleamed in his eyes, comprehension, and a flicker of something more, hope. "This isn't over, Clara." She felt her heart tighten. "It is over, Daniel. We signed those papers." "But a paper doesn't erase what we were." Clara averted her gaze. "But it can prevent us from being something again." The answer hung in the air. The past pursued them. And whether they wanted to or not, they would have to face it. Daniel was never a man who accepted defeat. For him, everything was a matter of strategy. Planning, control. He always knew exactly what he wanted and how to get it. He had built his career that way. He kept his life organized that way. The world was a chessboard, and he was always the most skilled player. But Clara was never a pawn in that game. And now, for the first time in his life, Daniel didn't know what to do. He watched her from the other side of the room, his arms crossed over his chest, as if trying to protect himself from her proximity. Since they received the news of the pregnancy, Clara had grown more distant each day, rejecting any attempt at closeness. But there were moments when he saw her resistance waver, when their gazes met for too long, when their fingers accidentally touched, when the silence between them became denser than the words they tried to say to each other. She still felt something for him. He knew it. But would it be enough? Daniel clenched his jaw and looked away to the window. Outside, the day stretched on, indifferent to the chaos within him. He hated that feeling of powerlessness, that uncertainty creeping under his skin like a poison. He needed to show he had changed. But how? Because, if he was honest with himself, he didn't know exactly how to change. Clara had always been his exception, his ruin and his salvation. And now, everything depended on his ability to convince her that he would never leave her alone again. He turned to look at her again, observing the way she kept her gaze fixed on the floor, her arms still crossed like an invisible barrier. "You can't push me away from this, Clara." She slowly raised her eyes, and he saw the internal battle reflected there. "I'm not trying to push you away, but that doesn't mean I trust you." Daniel took a deep breath, holding back the instinctive reply he wanted to give. The older version of himself would have argued, tried to reason with logic, proving with well-structured words that he was right. But that had never worked with Clara. And if he wanted her to believe him, he would have to act differently. He took a step forward. Clara didn't back away, but her body tensed. "I know words aren't enough, but if you give me the chance, I'll show you I'm different." She laughed, but there was no humor in her laugh. "Do you think this is a contract, Daniel? Something that can be resolved with promises and guarantees?" He studied her for a moment before replying. "No, I think it's much more than that." The answer took her by surprise. Clara blinked, her lips parted as if she was about to argue, but nothing came out. He moved a little closer, just enough to feel her accelerated breathing. "Let me be here." She held his gaze. "And when things get difficult, will you still be here?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes. And when work demands everything from you, I choose you." Clara closed her eyes for a moment, as if absorbing those words. When she opened them again, Daniel realized she wasn't ready to yield. Not yet. But something in her had changed. He saw it in the way she didn't retreat this time, in how her eyes lingered on his for a little longer before looking away. It still wasn't enough, but it was a beginning. Do you think Daniel has truly changed, or is this just a temporary reaction to the news? Share your thoughts in the comments. The months passed in a blur. Time, which once seemed an implacable enemy, now became a silent ally, allowing Clara and Daniel to navigate this new reality at a pace they could both handle. He was still there, present at every appointment, attentive to every detail, always making sure she didn't have to bear that burden alone. And Clara, little by little, began to allow herself to trust it. Not completely, not without reservations, but enough to accept the hot coffee he handed her without her having to ask, to let him walk her home when she was too tired to drive. Enough to allow him to be near. And then, in an instant, everything crumbled. It was an ordinary day, or at least, it should have been. Clara left the doctor's office with a discreet smile. The pregnancy was going well, the baby was healthy, and for the first time in a long time, she felt light. Until she saw Daniel across the street. She knew he would come for her. He always did lately. But there was something different about him that day. Something tense, rigid. Clara frowned and crossed the street, feeling a growing unease in her chest. Is everything all right? Daniel didn't answer immediately. His jaw was tight, his dark eyes laden with something she couldn't decipher. And then he blurted out, "Were you with him?" Clara blinked, confused. With whom? Edward. The name came out laden with venom, and only then did Clara understand. Edward was her former colleague, a friend, someone who had been close when her marriage began to fall apart, offering support without ever overstepping boundaries. But Daniel always hated Edward. He always saw him as a threat, even though Clara had assured him countless times that there was nothing between them beyond friendship. She felt a tightness in her chest. Daniel, I ran into him by chance. We talked for a few minutes and nothing more. But he was no longer listening. Sure, it was just a coincidence, right? The same guy who spent years waiting for me to make a mistake so he could get close to you. Daniel's tone was becoming harsher, colder, and in that instant, Clara felt transported back to the past, to a time when her every word was analyzed with distrust, when her every movement was a possible threat to the control Daniel insisted on having over her. And the worst part? She saw in his eyes that he perceived it too, that he saw the exact moment she closed herself off again. But instead of backing down, he advanced. Are you still talking to him? His voice was low, but laden with something somber. Clara crossed her arms. I'm not going to answer that kind of question. Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in his laugh. Of course not. Because you're never wrong, are you, Clara? She felt a knot form in her throat. He didn't realize what he was doing. Daniel, stop. But he didn't stop. I should have known. You've always had an enormous knack for trusting the wrong people. The words were spoken without thinking, but the impact was immediate. Clara stood motionless, her eyes wide, her breath caught in her chest. And then, something inside her broke. The silence that followed was worse than any scream. I'm not doing this again. Her voice came out low, but firm. Daniel realized too late. Clara. But she was already walking away. You promised you had changed. He ran a hand over his face, as if trying to contain something within himself. I did change. Then why do you keep trying to control me? He had no answer. Clara exhaled slowly, feeling her chest tremble. I need space. No! Daniel's reply was immediate, but this time it wasn't an order. It was a plea. "Don't push me away, Clara." She closed her eyes. "Then give me a reason not to." The silence that followed was devastating, and when Daniel finally tried to speak, it was too late. She was already gone. In the following days, Daniel tried to call, tried to stop by her apartment, tried to find any way to undo that mistake. But Clara didn't answer. And then, when he finally went to her house, he found the door closed, the lights off, and a neighbor who looked at him with pity. "She traveled," the man said. Daniel felt his stomach sink. "What do you mean, traveled?" "Where?" "I don't know, mate. I just know she rented the place out for a while. Said she was taking a break in the city." Daniel stood there, unable to react. Clara was gone. She was really gone. And this time, perhaps she wouldn't come back. He felt his heart pound in his chest, his breath shallow. His head told him that was it, that he had lost her. But then, for the first time in his life, Daniel realized that just wanting to change wasn't enough. He would have to prove it. And, above all, he would have to be patient. Clara was far away, and he didn't know if she would ever come back. But if she did, he would be ready. This time, without trying to control her, without trying to convince her, just waiting. Because for the first time, he was willing to be a man who deserved to be by her side. And if he had to wait forever, he would wait. She was gone. The emptiness that remained after Clara left was worse than anything Daniel had felt. It wasn't just the anger that pulsed in his mind, nor the frustration of having reverted to the man he promised he would never be again. It was fear, the fear of having lost her forever. In the following days, he tried to give her space, but her silence was unbearable. Clara didn't reply to his messages, didn't answer his calls. He stopped by her apartment, but she didn't open the door. And then, when he finally decided to back off and wait for her to come to him, fate showed him it wouldn't grant him that luxury. The call came in the middle of the night. The hospital number glowed on his phone screen, and everything inside him froze. "Mr. Davies?" The sound of his own name made his heart ache against his ribs. "Yes. You need to come to the hospital now. It's about Clara." He didn't remember the drive there, only the metallic taste of panic in his mouth, his trembling hands on the steering wheel, the suffocating feeling that if something happened to her or the baby, he would never forgive himself. When he arrived, the hospital was bathed in that cold, indifferent light, and the antiseptic smell seemed stronger than usual. He crossed the corridors with long strides until he found a nurse who immediately recognized him. "Where is she?" The woman hesitated for a second. "Mrs. Davies was admitted with complications. They had to take her to surgery." The word hit Daniel like a punch. "Surgery?" "She had a premature placental abruption. The situation is delicate, but the doctors are doing everything they can." Delicate. The word resonated in his mind as the world around him lost its shape. He sat in the nearest chair, but he couldn't feel anything beneath him. It was as if he were floating, as if his own existence had been reduced to that moment. And then, for the first time in his life, Daniel understood what it meant to be completely powerless. There was nothing he could do, no strategy he could devise, no money he could pay to fix this. He could only wait and pray. Time became distorted. Every minute seemed an eternity. And then, finally, a doctor appeared. Daniel jumped to his feet, his heart pounding. "How is she?" The doctor sighed, and Daniel felt the weight of that sound even before the words were spoken. "The baby is in fetal distress. We need to act fast." It was then that Daniel understood what that meant. They had to choose. Save Clara, or save the baby. The floor seemed to disappear beneath his feet. "We'll do our best for both of them," the doctor said, trying to remain calm. "But Mr. Davies, if we have to prioritize one of them, we need your decision now." The decision. The moment that would define everything. He looked towards the closed door of the room where Clara was. Would he lose her? After everything, after finally understanding that he loved her in a way he never comprehended before, after realizing that she was the center of everything, would he have to let her go? And then, for a second, a memory came to his mind. Clara, the first time she felt the baby move, bringing her hands to her belly with a smile of pure adoration. Clara, caressing the ultrasound picture as if she had known that little life inside her for years. Clara, saying softly, one night, without knowing he was listening, "I would do anything for my child." That was it. That was what really mattered. He closed his eyes for an instant and took a deep breath, and then he looked at the doctor. "Save the baby." The doctor nodded and disappeared down the corridors, and Daniel remained there, alone, feeling the weight of the most difficult decision he had ever made. Time passed slowly, and when the door to the surgery room finally opened, everything inside him stopped. Because there, surrounded by nurses, with a tired but alive look, was Clara. She survived, and the baby too. But something was different. Clara was weak, pale, her eyes heavy from exhaustion and pain. When their eyes finally met, something gleamed there. Not anger, not total relief, but something deep. Something between gratitude and incomprehension. She moved her lips, her voice almost a whisper. "You chose the baby?" Daniel's chest tightened. "I chose what you would have chosen." The silence between them was thick, and then the tears came. Not from him, but from her. Clara didn't cry from weakness, nor from pain. She cried because for the first time, she saw Daniel understand what it meant to love someone without trying to possess them, without trying to mold them. He understood. And in that instant, Daniel knew that his life would never be the same. This time, he hadn't fought to win Clara. He had fought to be the man she deserved. And perhaps, for the first time, he was close to achieving it. What it meant to love someone more than himself. And now, there, standing in front of the room where Clara held the baby's small, fragile body against her chest, Daniel felt something he had never experienced before. The fullness of having done the right thing. The following months were a blur of changes. Clara needed time to recover from the surgery. The baby was under observation for a few weeks, but soon the doctors assured them he was healthy. A boy, small, but strong. They named him Leo. It was Clara who chose the name, and Daniel didn't argue. For the first time, he accepted something without objection. He had already made all the wrong decisions in the past. This one, he wanted it to be hers. But accepting didn't mean everything was easy. Because, if there was one thing Daniel had learned, it was that love cannot be forced. Love is conquered, day after day. And that's exactly what he did. Clara's house became a silent refuge, where time seemed to slow down. Daniel came almost every day, but he didn't intrude. He never crossed the boundaries she imposed. When Clara needed to rest, he stayed with Leo. When Leo cried in the middle of the night, he arrived before Clara could get up. And when she felt lost, exhausted, overwhelmed with it all, Daniel simply was there. Without demanding, without pressuring, waiting. And Clara realized. She realized that for the first time, Daniel wasn't trying to control her. He wasn't trying to define what they would be. He simply remained present, like a silent certainty, like a firm foundation she could choose to use, or not. He changed, and she did too, because at some point, Clara found herself watching him with different eyes. Not the Daniel she had left, not the Daniel she feared, but the Daniel who held Leo in his arms with a tenderness she never imagined he possessed. The Daniel who wasn't impatient when the baby cried. The Daniel who made coffee for her every morning without saying anything, simply leaving the cup on the counter before he left. The Daniel who understood when she needed silence. And little by little, Clara felt the armor she had built begin to crack. Time passed. And then, something happened. The first time he touched her again was unintentional. Clara was on the sofa, holding Leo, when Daniel sat next to her. He gently ran his hand through the baby's hair, and his arm brushed hers. An insignificant touch, but Clara felt it. She felt the warmth of his skin, the familiarity of that gesture. She felt the years return in a second. She felt her heart race, and when she looked up, Daniel was already watching her. They remained like that for a moment. Silence, a mutual understanding. And then Clara looked away, because she wasn't ready yet. But she knew, in that instant, that it was only a matter of time. The problem was that time didn't wait for them. That night, it was raining heavily. Daniel was about to leave when Clara, who was watching the storm from the window, finally made a decision. "Stay." The word was said so softly that, for a second, Daniel thought he had imagined it. But then she turned to look at him, and in her eyes, there was something new, something definitive. He didn't ask if he could, and she didn't need to answer. Because when he approached, Clara raised her face to receive him. The kiss was slow, different from all the ones they had shared before. There was no rush. There was no need. It was a choice. And, when he separated his lips from hers, Clara finally realized. They weren't coming back because they needed each other. They were coming back because they loved each other. This time, their love wasn't a power game. It was a partnership. And finally, it was enough. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Your support helps us keep our content fresh and exciting for you. Thanks for joining us and being part of this journey.
The screeching of tires on wet asphalt pierced the morning air as a sleek, midnight blue Aston Martin swerved to avoid a delivery truck that had suddenly pulled out from a side street. Inside the luxury vehicle, Alexander Xander Blackwood, 34-year-old, tech mogul and recently crowned Manhattan's most eligible bachelor by Finance Monthly, gripped the steering wheel, his heart hammering against his ribcage. "That was too close," he muttered, adjusting his titanium watch worth more than most people's annual salary. Rain pounded against the windshield as he pulled into the first available parking spot. Xander needed caffeine, desperately. 3 consecutive, all-nighters finalizing the acquisition of his biggest competitor had left him running on fumes. His eyes landed on a modest establishment across the street, Sunrise Diner. Inside the diner, 27-year-old Mia Rodriguez was having the morning shift from hell. The coffee machine had broken down, they were short-staffed, and her manager had just called to say he wouldn't be coming in because his kids were sick. "Order up for table 5, shouted Carlo, the elderly cook who had been with the diner since before Mia was born. Balancing 3 plates of eggs and pancakes while dodging a spilled orange juice, Mia managed a genuine smile for the elderly couple at table 5. "Here you go, Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, just how you like them." "You're an angel, Mia," Mrs. Patterson said, reaching for her hand. "How's your mother doing?" Mia's smile flickered for just a second. "She's responding well to the treatments. Thank you for asking. The doctors are optimistic." What she didn't mention was the mounting medical bills that kept her awake at night, or the second notice of foreclosure on her childhood home that had arrived yesterday, or that her younger sister's college tuition was due next week. The bell above the door jingled, and Mia turned to see a tall figure shaking raindrops from what was clearly an outrageously expensive coat. Something about him seemed vaguely familiar. "Seat yourself anywhere," she called out, rushing to grab more coffee pots. Xander chose a corner booth with a view of the street. He hadn't been in a place like this since college, before his algorithm had revolutionized artificial intelligence and catapulted him into the stratosphere of wealth. Something about the simplicity appealed to him. No assistants, no shareholders, no board members demanding explanations for his unorthodox business decisions. "Coffee?" Mia appeared beside his table, coffee pot in hand, dark curls escaping from her messy bun. Xander looked up, and for the first time in years, found himself genuinely speechless. It wasn't just that she was beautiful, though she undeniably was. It was the weariness behind her smile that resonated with something deep inside him. "Yes, please, black." His voice came out rougher than intended. As she poured, Xander noticed her hands, clearly not manicured like those of the women who typically surrounded him, but strong and capable. When the sleeve of her uniform rode up slightly, he caught sight of an intricate tattoo, a compass rose. "Nice tattoo," he said, desperate to say something. "Are you a traveler?" Mia looked surprised at the personal question from a customer in a $3,000 suit. "Aspiring to be," she replied with a wry smile. "Haven't made it further than New Jersey yet, but I've got plans." Their eyes met, and time seemed to pause in that peculiar way it sometimes does when two souls recognize something kindred in each other. The moment shattered when a crash came from the kitchen, followed by Carlo's colorful Italian cursing. "I'd better." Mia gestured toward the kitchen. "Of course." Xander nodded. As she hurried away, he found himself watching her. The way she stopped to check on each table. Her efficient movements, the genuine warmth in her interactions with customers who clearly knew her well. His phone buzzed incessantly. His assistant, his lawyers, the press wanting statements about the acquisition. For the first time in recent memory, Xander Blackwood let his phone continue buzzing. Instead, he sipped his coffee and observed the morning ballet of the Sunrise Diner, with Mia at its center. What he couldn't have known was that across the diner, Mia was trying not to stare at the handsome stranger whose face she had just recognized from countless business magazines, or that the universe had just set in motion a series of events that would change both their lives forever. 3 days later, Mia was rushing through the monthly bills at her tiny kitchen table, calculator in one hand, and a cold cup of tea in the other. The apartment was quiet except for the rhythmic ticking of the ancient wall clock and the occasional rumble of the subway beneath the building. "That can't be right," she muttered, rechecking the hospital bill for the third time. The amount hadn't changed, $47,853.22 after insurance. Her mother's experimental cancer treatment wasn't covered, of course. Add that to the mortgage payments her father had fallen behind on before his death last year, her sister Lucia's tuition, and the regular monthly expenses. Mia pushed her hair back with both hands and took a deep breath. She'd figure it out. She always did. The buzzer rang, making her jump. No one ever visited on Tuesday afternoons. "Who is it?" she asked into the intercom. "Delivery for Mia Rodriguez," came the reply. Confused, she buzzed them in. When she opened her door, a delivery man stood there with an enormous bouquet of wildflowers. Not the typical roses or lilies, but meadow flowers in every color imaginable. "I didn't order these," she said, perplexed. "Already paid for." The delivery man shrugged, handing her an envelope before disappearing down the stairs. Inside was a handwritten note on thick cream-colored paper. "The coffee was excellent. I wonder if the chef would share his pancake recipe. Breakfast again tomorrow. X." No phone number, no explanation, just an address to one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city and a time, 9 a.m. "X," Mia whispered, then it clicked. The handsome stranger from 3 days ago, Alexander Blackwood, the tech billionaire whose face was plastered across the business section of every newspaper in the country. "No way," she laughed nervously to herself. "Absolutely no way." But the next morning, curiosity got the better of her. After dropping Lucia off at community college, Mia found herself standing outside Etoile, wearing her best sundress and feeling woefully underdressed despite her efforts. "Ms. Rodriguez?" A maitre d' approached her immediately. "Mr. Blackwood is waiting on the terrace." The terrace turned out to be a rooftop garden with breathtaking views of the city. Xander stood when he saw her, looking both imposing and somehow vulnerable in a simple blue button-down shirt and dark jeans. "You came," he said, sounding genuinely surprised. "I wasn't sure you would." "I'm not sure why I did," Mia admitted, accepting the seat he pulled out for her. "This isn't really my scene." "Mine either, if I'm being honest," Xander confessed, "but they make incredible pancakes." As if on cue, a server appeared with plates of fluffy pancakes drizzled with real maple syrup and fresh berries. "You ordered already?" Mia raised an eyebrow. "I took a chance," he said with a smile that made her stomach flip in a way that was entirely too teenage girl for her liking. Over breakfast, Mia found herself relaxing. Despite his wealth and status, Xander was surprisingly easy to talk to. They discovered shared tastes in obscure indie bands and a mutual hatred for pretentious food. "So," she said finally, setting down her coffee cup. "Why am I here, Mr. Blackwood?" "Xander, please," he corrected. "And that's a fair question." He leaned forward, his expression growing serious. "I have a proposition for you." Mia's defenses immediately went up. "I'm not interested in being anyone's charity case or weekend entertainment." "That's not..." Xander looked genuinely distressed. "I'm sorry, I'm handling this badly. Let me start over." He took a deep breath. "I run a foundation that helps families with medical debt. It's something personal to me after losing my mother to cancer when I was in college." This was not what Mia had expected. "I don't understand." "Your conversation with the elderly couple that day at the diner about your mother's treatments. I couldn't help overhearing." Xander looked apologetic. "My foundation could help with those bills, no strings attached." Mia felt a flash of anger mixed with embarrassment. "You've been investigating me?" "No. Well, yes, but not in a creepy way." Xander stumbled over his words. "That sounds terrible. What I mean is, the foundation has a process. We verify need before offering assistance." "So I'm just another case file?" Mia stood up, grabbing her purse. "No." Xander stood too, looking panicked. "This isn't coming out right at all. The truth is, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that day at the diner. The foundation is real. The help is real. But I also selfishly wanted to see you again. Mia hesitated, conflicted. This man could solve her family's financial problems with what amounted to pocket change for him. But accepting help had never been easy for her. I don't need your pity, she said quietly. It's not pity, Xander replied, his voice equally soft. It's admiration. You work harder than anyone I've ever met. You care for your family with everything you have. That's rare in my world. Their eyes locked, and Mia felt something shift between them, a recognition that went beyond their different circumstances. One condition, she said finally. I work it off. I don't know how, but I will. A slow smile spread across Xander's. Forsa? Actually, I might have just the thing. How do you feel about event planning? Event planning? Mia blinked, confused by the change in direction. I'm hosting a charity gala for the foundation in 3 weeks, Xander explained, his enthusiasm growing. My assistant just quit, and I'm drowning in details. You clearly know how to handle chaos and multiple demands. I'm a waitress, not an event planner, Mia pointed out. You're efficient, personable, and clearly good at managing difficult people, Xander countered. I've seen you handle 4 tables while dealing with a grumpy cook and maintaining a smile. That's more impressive than any resume. Mia couldn't help but laugh at his earnestness. You're serious? Completely, Xander nodded. It's a paid position with benefits. The foundation covers your mother's medical expenses regardless of whether you take the job. Those are separate things. As the morning sun bathed the terrace in golden light, Mia found herself at a crossroads. She could walk away from this bizarre encounter and continue struggling alone, or she could take a chance on the unexpected opportunity this enigmatic billionaire was offering. When do I start? She heard herself ask. The relief and joy on Xander's face was worth the leap of faith. Neither of them realized that across the restaurant, a woman in dark sunglasses was taking pictures of them on her phone, a woman whose venomous expression promised trouble ahead. 2 weeks into her new job, Mia still couldn't believe her life had taken such a dramatic turn. Her mother had been transferred to a top oncology center, her sister's tuition was paid in full, and the foreclosure notices had stopped arriving. But the most unexpected change was her growing closeness with Xander. No, absolutely not, Mia said firmly, standing in the middle of Xander's penthouse office. We are not serving caviar popsicles at a fundraiser for medical debt relief. Do you want to look completely tone-deaf? Xander's executive team exchanged nervous glances. No one spoke to Alexander Blackwood that way, except Mia apparently. To everyone's surprise, Xander burst out laughing. You're right. It was a terrible suggestion. He turned to his team. Mia has final say on all event details. Are we clear? The gala was only a week away, and against all odds, preparations were coming together beautifully. Mia had transformed Xander's vague concept into a coherent, meaningful event that would genuinely connect with donors while highlighting the foundation's mission. You need to go home, Xander said later that evening, finding Mia still at her desk at 9 o'clock. You've been here for 14 hours, says the man who probably sleeps 3 hours a night, Mia retorted without looking up from her laptop. That's different. I'm a hopeless workaholic with no personal life. And what exactly do you think I am? Mia finally looked up, a hint of a smile playing at her lips. Their eyes met, and that now familiar current passed between them, a mixture of challenge, respect, and something deeper neither was ready to name. Come on, Xander said suddenly, closing her laptop. I want to show you something. I have at least 20 emails to answer, Mia protested. They'll still be there tomorrow. Trust me on this. Curiosity won out, and soon they were in Xander's private elevator heading to the roof. When the doors opened, Mia gasped. The rooftop had been transformed into a miniature drive-in movie theater, complete with a large screen, one comfortable-looking car-seat sofa, and a projector. What is this? She asked, enchanted despite herself. You mentioned you loved old movies but never had time to see them anymore, Xander said, suddenly looking a bit uncertain. I thought maybe you built a private cinema because I mentioned liking old movies? Mia was incredulous. When you say it like that, it sounds excessive. Xander ran a hand through his hair, looking embarrassed. It's just, when was the last time you did something just for fun? Mia couldn't actually remember. I had them set up Roman Holiday, Xander continued. You said it was your mom's favorite and you'd never seen it. The gesture was so unexpectedly thoughtful that Mia felt a lump form in her throat. No one had ever paid such close attention to the small details she shared. There's popcorn, he added hopefully, pointing to an old-fashioned popcorn machine. You're not at all what people say about you, Mia said softly. Xander's expression turned guarded. What do people say? That you're ruthless, cold, calculating. Mia stepped closer to him. But that's not the man who remembers his assistant's coffee order and asks about her dog, or who notices when the janitor's daughter graduates and sends flowers, or who builds a rooftop cinema for a girl who likes old movies. Maybe I'm only that way with you, Xander admitted, his voice low. The air between them charged with possibility. For a moment, Mia thought he might kiss her, and more surprisingly, she realized she wanted him to. Instead, Xander's phone rang shrilly. He grimaced, checking the screen. I have to take this. It's Tokyo, I'm sorry. Go. Mia smiled understandingly. I'll watch the beginning. Join me when you can. An hour later, Xander finally returned to find Mia curled up on the car seat sofa, completely absorbed in the movie. Without a word, he sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. Without looking away from the screen, Mia shifted over and rested her head against his shoulder. Slowly, cautiously, Xander's arm came around her. This is unprofessional, Mia murmured, though she didn't move away. Completely, Xander agreed. I should maintain better boundaries. Absolutely. I'm serious, she insisted, though she nestled closer. I know, he said softly, his breath warm against her hair. We should talk about it. Tomorrow, Mia decided. Tonight, I just want to watch the movie. Tomorrow, Xander agreed. But tomorrow brought chaos. Mia arrived at the office to find Xander in a heated argument with a striking blonde woman whose face seemed vaguely familiar. You can't just replace me with some diner waitress, the woman was shouting as Mia walked in. Victoria, that's enough. Xander's voice was ice cold, a tone Mia had never heard from him. You quit, remember? I can't work for someone with no heart. Your exact words. Victoria, the former assistant, Mia realized, spotted her and narrowed her perfectly made-up eyes. Her? This is who you replaced me with? Ms. Rodriguez is more qualified than you ever were, Xander stated flatly. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have work to do. Victoria smiled thinly. You always did have a thing for charity cases, Xander. Remember how that worked out last time? After she stormed out, an uncomfortable silence fell between them. Ex-girlfriend? Mia finally asked, trying to sound casual. Ex-everything, Xander sighed. Assistant, girlfriend, almost fiancé. It ended badly. I see, Mia said, though she didn't, not really. The glimpse of Xander's past life, filled with beautiful, sophisticated women like Victoria, reminded her sharply of the differences between them. No, you don't. Xander stepped closer. Victoria was what everyone expected me to want. She fit the role perfectly, but I never felt with her what I feel when... The intercom buzzed, interrupting what promised to be an important confession. Mr. Blackwood, the board members have arrived for the emergency meeting. The moment broken, Xander stepped back. We'll talk later, after the gala preparations. Mia nodded, but as she watched him switch instantly into corporate mode, she couldn't help wondering if she was setting herself up for heartbreak. After all, what could a billionaire tech genius and a waitress from the Bronx really have in common once the novelty wore off? Later that afternoon, Mia was reviewing seating arrangements when her phone pinged with a news notification. The headline made her blood run cold. Tech Titans charity case. Blackwood's new romance raises eyebrows. The article featured photos of her and Xander on the rooftop the night before, along with quotes from an insider claiming Xander had a pattern of rescuing women before growing bored and moving on. As she stared at the screen in disbelief, another text came through, this one from her sister Lucia. "Mom's seeing this too. What's going on, Mia?" The night of the gala arrived with a flurry of activity. Mia had barely spoken to Xander in the 3 days since the tabloid article broke. She'd thrown herself into finalizing the event details, determined to fulfill her professional obligations despite the personal turmoil. Her mother had been surprisingly understanding. "People will always talk, Mija," she'd said during Mia's brief visit to the hospital. "The question is, does he make you happy?" Mia hadn't answered. How could she when she wasn't sure herself? Now, standing at the entrance of the grand ballroom in a midnight blue gown, Xander had insisted on having designed for her. "It's a work expense. You're representing the foundation." Mia greeted donors with practiced charm while keeping one eye on the door. Xander was late, unusual for someone who valued punctuality as much as he did. When he finally appeared, Mia nearly dropped her tablet. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes, but devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo. Their eyes met across the room, and for a moment everything else faded. Then Victoria appeared at his side, perfect in a red designer gown, her arm possessively linked through his. Mia felt the floor shift beneath her. Of course, the tabloid stories had threatened the foundation's reputation. Xander was just doing damage control by reverting to his expected lifestyle. The brief fantasy Mia had allowed herself, that maybe, just maybe, their worlds could combine, crumbled. "Ms. Rodriguez?" A server approached her. "Mr. Blackwood asked to see you in the East Terrace, immediately." Steeling herself, Mia made her way through the crowd. She would be professional. She would hand over her notes for the evening, thank him for the opportunity, and walk away with her dignity intact. The East Terrace was empty except for Xander, who stood alone at the balustrade, staring out at the city lights. "Victoria looks lovely," Mia said by way of greeting, proud of how steady her voice sounded. Xander turned, surprise evident in his expression. "Victoria is here as a guest of the board chairman, not with me." "Oh," Mia faltered. "The way she was holding your arm, I thought—" "That was for the cameras," Xander interrupted, moving toward her. "She's trying to create a narrative, just like she did with that tabloid piece." "She leaked the story?" Mia shouldn't have been surprised, but somehow she was. "With considerable embellishment," Xander confirmed. "Victoria likes control. She doesn't appreciate being replaced, professionally or personally." A moment of silence stretched between them. The sounds of the gala drifted from inside. Glasses clinking, elegant laughter, the quartet playing soft jazz. "I've been avoiding you," Xander admitted. "Not because of the article, but because I realized something when I saw it." Mia braced herself. Here it came. The gentle letdown. The "it's been fun but not practical" speech. "I realized I'm in love with you," Xander said instead, his voice rough with emotion. "And it terrifies me." Mia stared at him. "You're... what?" "In love with you," he repeated more firmly this time. "Not with the idea of rescuing you or whatever nonsense Victoria's spreading. With you, stubborn, brilliant, compassionate you." "But you could have anyone," Mia whispered, the insecurity she'd been battling finally surfacing. "I don't want anyone." Xander moved closer, taking her hands in his. "I want the woman who calls me on my privilege, who works harder than anyone I've ever met, who made me watch Roman Holiday and cried at the ending." Despite herself, Mia smiled. "It was a sad ending." "It doesn't have to be for us," Xander said softly. "I know this is fast," I know it's complicated, but these past weeks you've made me happier than I've been in years. You see me. Not my money, not my company, just me. Mia felt tears gathering. What about the differences between us? Your world, my world. They're just places, Xander insisted. What matters is who we are together. I don't care what anyone thinks. I care what you think, how you feel. Mia looked up at him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes. This man who commanded boardrooms and built tech empires was laying his heart bare before her, asking for nothing but honesty in return. I think, she said slowly, that I've been falling in love with you since you built me a rooftop cinema. Joy dawned across Xander's face. Really? Really, Mia confirmed, stepping closer. But there are conditions, Xander nodded solemnly, though his eyes sparkled. Name them. I keep my job at the foundation, but I earn it on merit. No special treatment. Agreed, Xander said. You're already the most effective manager we've ever had. I finish my degree, Mia continued. The one I had to abandon when my father got sick. Absolutely, Xander nodded. Though I'll miss you while you're in class. And, Mia took a deep breath. We take this slowly, day by day, no rushing. Xander's hands came up to frame her face. I would wait forever for you, Mia Rodriguez. But I really, really want to kiss you right now. She smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in years. I suppose that's acceptable. When their lips finally met, it felt like coming home to a place she'd never been before. Perfect. Right. Inevitable. Later, as they returned to the gala hand in hand, there were whispers and stares. Victoria's face turned thunderous, but none of it mattered. The foundation raised a record amount that night. Mia's mother's treatment continued successfully. Lucia graduated with honors and started her own business with Xander's mentorship. The Sunrise Diner received an anonymous donation that allowed Carlo to finally retire, though he still came in 3 days a week because he missed the regulars. 6 months later, Mia moved into Xander's penthouse, but only after insisting on paying for renovations herself with her foundation salary. A year after that, he proposed on the rooftop cinema during a screening of Casablanca. Here's looking at you, kid, he quoted with that boyish grin that still made her heart flip. That's the cheesiest proposal ever, Mia laughed through her tears. Is that a yes? Xander asked, the billion-dollar man suddenly as nervous as a schoolboy. Mia kissed him deeply before pulling back with a smile. That's what took you so long? 2 years to the day from their first meeting at the Sunrise Diner, they were married in a small ceremony with their closest friends and family. No press, no celebrities, just the people who mattered most. At the reception, Mrs. Patterson, from the diner, nudged her husband. I knew it from the moment he walked in that rainy morning. The way he looked at her, like she was the answer to a question he hadn't even known to ask. Mr. Patterson squeezed her hand. Some hearts just recognize each other. Across the room, Xander twirled Mia on the dance floor, both of them laughing. In the end, it wasn't about a billionaire saving a waitress. It was about two people whose lives had been missing something vital until they found each other, proving, once again, that the richest currency in any universe is love. The squeal of tires against wet asphalt pierced the morning air as Eliza Sinclair dove out of the way, landing hard on the rain-soaked sidewalk. Her portfolio exploded on impact, sending sketches and designs fluttering across the street like nervous butterflies. The sleek black Aston Martin screeched to a halt mere inches from where she had been standing. "Are you blind?" Eliza shouted, her heart pounding against her ribs as she scrambled to salvage her work. The rain was already turning her carefully crafted designs into watercolor abstractions. The driver's door swung open, and a tall figure emerged, seemingly unbothered by the downpour that instantly darkened his impeccably tailored suit. Sebastian Thorne. His face was unmistakable, plastered across business magazines and tabloids alike, stood before her with a perplexed expression, as if it were she who had inconvenienced him. "You ran a red light," she snapped, gathering soggy papers with trembling hands. Sebastian glanced at the traffic signal, then back at her. "I'm fairly certain I didn't, and I'm certain I wasn't attempting suicide by luxury vehicle this morning." The ghost of a smile crossed his face. "You have quite the mouth for someone who just threw themselves in front of a $500,000 car." "Bill me," Eliza muttered, stuffing the last of her ruined portfolio into her bag. "I might just do that," he replied, his eyes lingering on her in a way that made her skin prickle. "What's your name?" "Not interested," she said, turning to walk away. "Wait." His voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone used to being obeyed. To her own annoyance, Eliza stopped. "Your portfolio. Let me replace it." "These are original designs, they can't be replaced." Sebastian produced a business card from his pocket, somehow still crisp despite the rain. "Call this number. My assistant will arrange a meeting." "Why would I want to meet with you?" Eliza asked, but took the card anyway. "Because I'm Sebastian Thorne and I never offer second chances." He slid back into his car with the fluid grace of a predator. "Also, you're bleeding." Eliza looked down at her scraped palm, rainwater mixing with blood in pale pink rivulets. When she looked up again, the Aston Martin was already disappearing around the corner. The hospital room was too quiet, save for the rhythmic beeping of monitors that had become the soundtrack to Eliza's life these past months. Her mother, once vibrant and full of life, now seemed to sink into the sterile white sheets. "How was your interview?" Margaret Sinclair asked, her voice thin but her eyes still sharp. Eliza forced a smile. "Rescheduled. There was a transportation issue. You can't keep missing opportunities because of me, sweetheart." "Mom, please, not this again." A nurse entered, her expression grim as she handed Eliza a thick envelope. "This just came from billing." Eliza's stomach dropped as she scanned the contents. The experimental treatment her mother needed had been denied by insurance. Again. The figure at the bottom of the page made her dizzy. $1.7 million. "Everything okay?" her mother asked. "Perfect," Eliza lied, tucking the paperwork away. "Just some paperwork to fill out." Later in the hospital cafeteria, Eliza emptied her wallet onto the table. $43 and a collection of coins. Her phone buzzed with a text from her landlord, "Rent overdue, final notice." She laughed bitterly, reaching for her coffee. Her fingers brushed against something in her jacket pocket. Sebastian Thorne's business card, slightly warped from the rain but still legible. "Desperate times," she whispered to herself, punching the number into her phone. The response was almost immediate. A meeting was set for tomorrow at Thorne Tower. Eliza had no idea why a billionaire would want to meet with her, but at this point, she had nothing left to lose. When she arrived at the imposing glass skyscraper the next morning, Sebastian was waiting in his penthouse office, framed by floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the city like it was his personal playground. "Miss Sinclair?" he said, not looking up from his desk. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't call. You almost killed me. I figured the least you could do was buy me a coffee." Sebastian finally looked at her, amusement flickering in his steel-gray eyes. "Coffee? Is that what you think this is about?" Eliza shifted uncomfortably. "Why am I here, Mr. Thorne? I had you investigated," he said casually as if commenting on the weather. Talented designer, struggling financially, mother with stage 4 lymphoma, requiring experimental treatment not covered by insurance. He tapped a file on his desk. Mounting hospital bills, eviction notice. Eliza felt the blood drain from her face. That's private. Privacy is a luxury, Miss Sinclair, one you can't afford. Sebastian stood, circling his desk to lean against it, uncomfortably, close to her. "I have a proposition for you. I'm not interested in becoming your charity case." "Good, because I'm not in the charity business." His eyes locked with hers. "I'm proposing a contract, marriage, to be specific." The world seemed to tilt beneath Eliza's feet. "Excuse me?" "1 year of marriage. In return, I'll cover your mother's medical expenses, all of them, and set you up with your own design studio afterward." "Why would you?" "I don't understand." Sebastian's expression hardened. "My reasons are my own, but rest assured this arrangement would be beneficial for both of us." "This is insane," Eliza whispered. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." He handed her a thick document. "The contract. Read it. You have until tomorrow to decide." As Eliza left the tower, contract clutched in her shaking hands, one thought echoed in her mind. What kind of man offers marriage as a business transaction? And what kind of woman would be desperate enough to accept? She already knew the answer to the second question. Eliza sat cross-legged on her worn couch, the 30-page marriage contract spread before her like a battlefield map. Dawn was breaking outside her tiny apartment window, casting a pale golden light across the pages she'd been studying all night. "Page 27, she muttered, circling another clause. "Required public displays of affection, within reason." She snorted. "Define within reason, Mr. Thorne." Her phone buzzed with a hospital notification. Her mother's morning vitals were stable. That small relief did little to quiet the war in her mind. She glanced at her laptop screen, where she'd pulled up everything she could find on Sebastian Thorne, 34 years old, self-made billionaire by 28, no serious relationships on record, rumored to be ruthlessly efficient in both business and pleasure. "This is certifiable," she told her empty apartment. Her ancient tabby, cat Oscar meowed in what seemed like agreement. Yet as her eyes fell on the stack of hospital bills on her kitchen counter, Eliza felt the weight of reality crushing her romantic notions. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford, not with her mother's life hanging in the balance. The buzzer rang, startling her. Through the intercom, a crisp voice announced, "Car for Miss Sinclair." Outside, a gleaming black Bentley waited. The driver opened the door without speaking, revealing Sebastian lounging in the back seat, engrossed in his phone. "Most people wait for an answer before sending a car," Eliza said, sliding in beside him. Sebastian didn't look up. "Most people aren't negotiating marriage with me. I haven't agreed to anything. Yet you're here." He finally met her gaze, a challenge in his eyes. "The contract questions?" Eliza pulled out her annotated copy. Several, actually, starting with why. "I told you—" "No, you didn't," she interrupted. "You said your reasons were your own. That's not good enough if you expect me to legally bind myself to you for a year." Something flickered across Sebastian's face. Respect, perhaps, though. It vanished so quickly Eliza couldn't be sure. "My grandfather's will," he said after a long pause. "To receive my full inheritance, I must be married by my 35th birthday. That's in 3 months." Eliza stared at him. "That's archaic. Old money, old values. My grandfather was convinced I'd die alone, married only to my work." A sardonic smile curved his lips. He wasn't entirely wrong. "So I'm just a checkbox on your inheritance to-do list?" "A mutually beneficial arrangement," Sebastian corrected. "You need money for your mother's treatment. I need a wife who won't expect romance or attachment. Perfect alignment of interests." Eliza bristled at his clinical assessment. even as she recognized the truth in it. The public affection clause? For appearances. My family and business associates must believe this is genuine. And the mandatory residence at your penthouse? Again, appearances. He studied her with unnerving intensity. You've read the contract thoroughly. I'm impressed. Most people would have signed immediately given the sums involved. I'm not most people. Clearly. Something that might have been a genuine smile tugged at his mouth. Any other concerns? Eliza took a deep breath. The fidelity clause. Sebastian raised an eyebrow. Problem? Not for me, but for you. A year is a long time for someone with your, reputation. He laughed then, a real laugh that transformed his face, making him look younger, almost approachable. My reputation is greatly exaggerated, Miss Sinclair. Eliza, she corrected automatically. If we're getting married, you should probably use my first name. Eliza, he repeated as if testing how it felt on his tongue. Then you should call me Sebastian. The car slowed to a stop, and Eliza realized they had arrived at the hospital. Sebastian had known where she was headed without asking. How did you... I make it my business to know things, he said suddenly. All business again. Your mother's new treatment begins today. I've already arranged everything with the hospital. The experimental protocol from Sweden. Eliza's throat tightened. I haven't signed anything yet. Consider it a gesture of good faith. He handed her a slim fountain pen. But I will need your decision by the end of the day. As Eliza stepped out of the car, Sebastian added, Your mother will be told we met at a charity gala 6 months ago. A whirlwind romance, it's all in the contract. More lies, Eliza murmured. Think of it as a script, Sebastian replied. One with a very happy ending for your mother. Margaret Sinclair looked better than she had in months. The new treatment was already working, or perhaps it was the hope shining in her eyes as she studied the enormous bouquet of lilies that had arrived that morning. Tell me about him, she insisted, clutching Eliza's hand. Sebastian Thorne. I've seen him in magazines. How did you keep this secret from me? Eliza forced a smile, reciting the story Sebastian had crafted. A chance meeting at a gallery opening. Coffee that turned into dinner. His unexpected interest in her designs. He's not what you'd expect, Eliza said, surprising herself with the truth in those words. When can I meet him? As if summoned by the question, Sebastian appeared in the doorway, looking less like a corporate shark and more like a man visiting his future mother-in-law, casually elegant in a sweater that probably cost more than Eliza's rent. Mrs. Sinclair, he said warmly, crossing to take her hand. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Eliza watched in astonishment as Sebastian charmed her mother, discussing her favorite books and music with seemingly genuine interest. He sat for over an hour, never checking his phone once, asking questions about Margaret's life as an art teacher with real curiosity. When a nurse came to administer Margaret's treatment, Sebastian excused himself, promising to return soon. I see why you fell for him, Margaret whispered after he left. The way he looks at you when you're not watching, like you're a puzzle he can't quite solve. Eliza's heart stuttered. He looks at me? All the time, darling. Her mother smiled, knowingly. And you look at him too. Outside the hospital room, Sebastian waited, his mask of warmth replaced by his usual impenetrable expression. You were convincing, Eliza admitted. I'm good at what I do. He checked his watch. Your decision? The image of her mother's hopeful face flashed in Eliza's mind, the improved color in her cheeks, the Swedish treatment that might save her life. One condition, Eliza said. My mother never knows this isn't real, even after the year is up. We'll say it didn't work out, but she never learns it was a transaction. Sebastian studied her face. Agreed. Eliza took the contract from her bag and, with a deep breath, signed her name on the final page. Congratulations, Miss Sinclair, Sebastian said, taking the contract. We're getting married on Saturday. This Saturday? Eliza gasped. That's in 3 days. Time is money, he replied with a shrug. And speaking of money, your mother's medical bills have been cleared. My assistant will contact you about moving arrangements. As Sebastian walked away, Eliza called after him. Is that it? We're engaged and you're just leaving? He turned, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. What were you expecting? A kiss to seal the deal? The challenge in his voice made Eliza's cheeks burn. Of course not. Good. Because this isn't a love story, Eliza. His voice was cold, but something in his expression didn't quite match his words. It's a business arrangement. The sooner you remember that, the better for both of us. As Sebastian disappeared down the corridor, Eliza pressed her hand against her racing heart. What had she gotten herself into? And why, despite his warnings, did something deep inside her whisper that this might become a very different story than either of them had planned? The wedding was nothing like Eliza had imagined as a little girl. No white dress passed down through generations, no childhood friends as bridesmaids, no father to walk her down the aisle. Instead, she wore a designer gown Sebastian's stylist had selected, an elegant sheath of ivory silk that probably cost more than her college education. The ceremony took place in Sebastian's penthouse, with only her mother, a handful of Sebastian's business associates, and a justice of the peace in attendance. Yet somehow, when Sebastian slipped the platinum band onto her finger and murmured, "With this ring I thee wed," Eliza felt an unexpected flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with their arrangement. The reception that followed was small, but extravagant. Margaret Sinclair, looking stronger than she had in months, beamed at Eliza from across the room. "You look happy," came Sebastian's voice from behind her, startling Eliza from her thoughts. "My mother's getting better," Eliza replied, turning to face her new husband. "Thanks to you?" Something unreadable flickered across Sebastian's face. "Don't thank me, it's a transaction." "Right," Eliza said, her smile faltering. "Just business." "Mrs. Thorne," called one of Sebastian's colleagues, raising a champagne flute. "How does it feel to have tamed New York's most notorious bachelor?" Before Eliza could respond, Sebastian's arm slid around her waist, pulling her against him. "I'd say I'm the one who got captured," he said smoothly, his fingers tracing small circles on her hip. "Eliza sees right through me. It's terrifying." The gathered guests laughed appreciatively, completely taken in by the performance. "You're good at this," Eliza whispered, when they were alone again. "Section 12, paragraph 3 of our contract," Sebastian replied. "Public displays of affection shall appear genuine and spontaneous." "Of course, the contract." Eliza pulled away slightly. "I'm going to check on my mother." Later that night, after the guests had departed and Margaret had been settled in the guest suite down the hall, Eliza stood awkwardly in the master bedroom, surveying the king-sized bed. "I'll take the couch," Sebastian said from the doorway, already loosening his tie. "There's a perfectly good guest room," Eliza pointed out, "which your mother is occupying." He shrugged out of his jacket. "The couch is fine." "This is ridiculous. The bed is the size of my entire apartment. We can share it." Sebastian raised an eyebrow. Section 15, paragraph 2. No physical intimacy shall be required or expected. "I'm not propositioning you," Eliza said, feeling her cheeks warm. "Just being practical. Besides, my mother might come in. What kind of newlyweds sleep separately?" Sebastian considered this. "Fine, but stay on your side." Hours later, Eliza lay awake, acutely aware of Sebastian's presence on the other side of the bed. His breathing had evened out, suggesting he was asleep, but something told her he was just as awake as she was. "Why me?" she asked suddenly into the darkness. "You could have hired anyone for this. Someone with social connections, someone from your world." For so long there was silence that Eliza thought he might really be asleep after all. Then his voice came, low and thoughtful. "You were genuine. When we met, you didn't know who I was, or you didn't care. Do you know how rare that is in my life?" A pause. Also, I nearly killed you with my car. Seemed only fair to make you my wife. Eliza couldn't help but laugh. That's terrible logic. I'm known for my business acumen, not my romantic gestures. Clearly. She rolled onto her side, facing him in the darkness. Good night, Sebastian. Good night, Mrs. Thorne. 6 months into their marriage, something had shifted. What had begun as a cold business arrangement had developed into something else. Not love, Eliza told herself firmly, but not nothing either. Sebastian had surprised her in countless small ways. The way he remembered how she took her coffee, how he'd converted one of the penthouse's spare rooms into a design studio for her, filled with equipment she'd only dreamed of owning. The way he actually listened when she spoke about her creative process, asking questions that showed genuine interest. Most surprising was how he'd taken to visiting her mother with her, bringing books Margaret mentioned wanting to read, engaging her in fierce debates about art and literature. When Margaret had a setback in her treatment, it was Sebastian who held Eliza through the night as she cried, his usual armor of sarcasm nowhere to be found. You know, Margaret said one afternoon as they sat in her new apartment, another of Sebastian's business decisions, moving her from her cramped walk-up to a doorman building with an elevator. I wasn't sure about him at first. Too polished, too perfect. Sebastian's far from perfect, Eliza replied automatically. That's my point, darling. He isn't perfect, but he's perfect for you. Margaret smiled knowingly. The way you two orbit each other, always aware of where the other is in the room. That can't be faked. Eliza swallowed hard. Mom, I know you probably thought I'd disapprove. The whirlwind romance, the age difference, his wealth. But love doesn't follow rules, sweetheart. And what you two have is the real thing. The real thing. The words echoed in Eliza's mind that evening as she prepared for the Thorne Industries charity gala, their first major public appearance as a couple. Sebastian had been distant all week, buried in work, barely speaking to her except to confirm details for tonight. The gown he'd had delivered was stunning, a deep emerald that made her eyes look like jade. As she fastened the diamond necklace, he'd left in a velvet box on her vanity. For appearances, the note had read. Eliza faced an uncomfortable truth. Somewhere along the way, she'd fallen in love with her husband. Her temporary, contractual, emotionally unavailable husband. When Sebastian finally emerged from his home office, his eyes widened almost imperceptibly at the sight of her. You look, he began, then cleared his throat. The dress is suitable. High praise, Eliza muttered. In the car, Sebastian was unusually tense. There will be press, he said. Lots of questions about our relationship. I know the script, Eliza replied, staring out the window. That's not... Sebastian ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. There's something I need to tell you. But before he could continue, they arrived at the venue, immediately surrounded by photographers and reporters shouting questions. Sebastian, over here. How's married life treating New York's most eligible bachelor? Sebastian's arm went around Eliza's waist, his public persona slipping into place seamlessly. Being married to Eliza is the best decision I never planned to make, he said, his practiced charm on full display. The gala was a blur of introductions and small talk. Eliza played her part perfectly, laughing at the right moments, touching Sebastian's arm affectionately, sharing the story of their whirlwind romance with practiced ease. It was during a quiet moment when Sebastian had been pulled away by a business associate that Eliza overheard a conversation that froze her blood. Grandfather's will was just a cover story, a woman in a glittering gold dress was saying. The real reason is the Takahashi merger. They wouldn't do business with him unless he settled down. Too many scandals with their female executives. The marriage is just for show until the deal closes next month. Poor girl probably has no idea, her companion replied, though the settlement must be worth it. Eliza felt as if all the air had been sucked from the room, a lie within a lie. Not for his inheritance, but for a business deal, and it was nearly complete. She was searching for the exit when Sebastian found her, his expression concerned. "Eliza, what's wrong?" "The Takahashi merger," she said flatly. "That's the real reason, isn't it? Not your grandfather's will." The color drained from Sebastian's face. "I can explain. Don't bother. I'm going home." She turned to leave, but Sebastian caught her arm. "Not here," he said, his voice low. "Please." Back at the penthouse, Eliza paced the living room, still in her emerald gown. "Were you ever going to tell me? Or just serve me divorce papers once the deal closed?" "That's not..." Sebastian loosened his tie in frustration. "Yes, the merger was the initial reason, but things changed." "What changed, Sebastian? The contract? Because I don't recall seeing actual honesty in any of the clauses." "I changed," he shouted, shocking them both with his vehemence. "I changed. Eliza, I didn't expect this. Any of this." He gestured between them, his composure cracking. "I didn't expect you." Eliza shook her head, tears threatening. "More lies." "No." Sebastian moved closer, his voice dropping. "The lie was pretending this was just business. The lie was telling myself I wasn't falling in love with you." Eliza's heart stuttered. "What did you say?" "I love you." The word seemed to surprise him as much as her. "God help me, I love you, Eliza. I think I have since you yelled at me in the rain. But the contract, tear it up. Burn it." He took her hands in his. "The merger closed last week. I didn't tell you because I was afraid. Afraid you'd leave. That you were just fulfilling your obligation." Eliza stared at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. "How do I know this isn't just another performance?" Sebastian released her hands and stepped back. "You're right. You don't." He walked to his office and returned with a document, their marriage contract. "Here, you're free. Your mother's treatment is paid in full. The design studio is yours. The apartment too, if you want it." He placed the contract in her hands. "You owe me nothing, Eliza, but I owe you the truth. I love you. If you want to stay, stay because of that, not because of any contract." Eliza looked down at the document that had brought them together, then back at the man who had unexpectedly captured her heart. With deliberate slowness, she tore the contract in half, then in quarters, letting the pieces fall to the floor between them. "Section 37, paragraph 1, she said softly. Sebastian looked confused. "There is no Section 37. "Exactly." Eliza stepped over the torn contract and into his arms. "We're writing our own terms now." His arms encircled her, tentative at first, then pulling her tightly against him. "And what would those be, Mrs. Thorne?" "For starters," Eliza whispered, her lips inches from his, "that this is no longer a business arrangement." Sebastian's smile was unlike any she'd seen before, open, genuine, a little vulnerable. "I think I can agree to those terms." As his lips finally met hers in their first real kiss, not for show, not for appearances, but for themselves alone, Eliza realized that sometimes the finest print in any contract is the part that's never written down. The part where two people who are pretending not to fall in love forget they're pretending. Epilogue. 1 year later, Margaret Sinclair sat in the front row of the small chapel, tears of joy streaming down her face as she watched her daughter and son-in-law renew their vows. "I still don't understand why you wanted another wedding," she told them at the reception afterward. "The first one was lovely." Sebastian and Eliza exchanged knowing smiles. "The first one was missing something essential," Sebastian said, his arm around Eliza's waist. Not for show, but because he couldn't bear not to touch her. "What's that?" Margaret asked. Eliza leaned into her husband's embrace, remembering the contract that had brought them together and the love that had torn it apart. "The right paperwork," she said with a laugh. "But we figured it out eventually." The morning air crackled with electricity as Vivian Hayes hurried down Fifth Avenue, her worn messenger bag bouncing against her hip. She was already 15 minutes late for her barista shift, and Mrs. Gonzalez had warned her that one more tardy would mean termination. With student loans piling up and rent due in 3 days, losing this job wasn't an option. Come on, she muttered, dodging tourists who seemed determined to walk as slowly as humanly possible. The light at the intersection turned red just as she reached it. Damn it. Vivian checked her watch. 17 minutes late now. Ignoring the flashing "Don't Walk" sign, she darted into the street. The screeching of tires was her only warning before her body collided with cold metal. Her coffee cup exploded against the hood of a midnight black Bentley, sending hot liquid cascading across the immaculate finish. Are you completely blind or just spectacularly stupid? A sharp British voice cut through her daze as she regained her balance. Vivian looked up to see an impeccably dressed man emerging from the Bentley's back seat. Everything about him screamed money, from his tailored Armani suit to his hand-stitched Oxford shoes. His face might have been handsome if it weren't contorted with rage. You just ruined a $250,000 paint job, he snarled, brushing invisible dust from his sleeve. Do you have any idea who I am? The small crowd that had gathered began whispering. Vivian caught fragments. Maxwell Blackwood, and richest man in Manhattan. I don't care if you're the King of England, Vivian retorted, trying to salvage what was left of her pride. You nearly hit me. Maxwell's eyes narrowed dangerously. Actually, you ran in front of my car against the light like some deranged squirrel. He pulled out his phone. What's your name? My lawyers will be in touch about damages. Vivian laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Damages? I'm working 3 jobs to make rent, and you want to sue me over car polish? Go ahead. You can't get blood from a stone. Something in Maxwell's expression shifted. Surprised perhaps that someone would speak to him this way, he studied her more carefully, taking in her mismatched thrift store clothes and defiant green eyes. 3 jobs, you say? His tone shifted to something more calculating, yet still so carelessly late that you'd risk your life to save a few minutes? Some of us have actual problems, Vivian shot back, already backing away. Not all of us can throw money at every inconvenience. A ghost of a smile played at Maxwell's lips. Oh, but money solves most problems rather efficiently. He snapped his fingers and his driver appeared with a business card. Maxwell Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Enterprises. Perhaps we can find a more creative solution to your situation. I don't need your charity, Vivian said, but took the card reflexively. Charity? Hardly. Maxwell's eyes glinted like polished steel. I have a proposition that might solve both our problems. Come to my office tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp. He returned to his car, then paused. And Ms. Hayes. Vivian Hayes. Ms. Hayes, do try not to be late this time. I abhor tardiness. As the Bentley pulled away, Vivian glanced at the elegant card in her hand, then at her watch. 23 minutes late now. Her job was almost certainly gone. What kind of proposition could a billionaire have for someone like her? And why? Did the look in his eyes make her pulse quicken with both warning and something she wasn't ready to name? Vivian slipped the card into her pocket. She'd probably throw it away. Probably. But somehow she knew she wouldn't. The Blackwood Enterprises headquarters pierced the Manhattan skyline like a gleaming silver dagger. Vivian stood at its base, neck craned upward, clutching a paper cup of lukewarm coffee. Her reflection in the mirrored glass looked small and out of place. This is insane, she muttered to herself. After losing her barista job yesterday, as predicted, curiosity had gotten the better of her. That, and desperation. The security guard eyed her suspiciously as she approached the desk. I have an appointment with Maxwell Blackwood, she said, amazed at how steady her voice sounded. Name? The guard didn't bother looking up from his computer. Vivian Hayes. His fingers paused on the keyboard. ID, please. After verifying her identity, he handed her a visitor's badge. Express elevator, top floor. The elevator ascended with stomach-lurching speed. Vivian used the 60-second ride to rehearse what she'd say. She wasn't interested in whatever bizarre offer he had planned, but if he felt guilty about nearly running her over, a simple check to cover her lost wages would suffice. The elevator. Doors opened to reveal a stark minimalist reception area with panoramic views of the city. A sleek blonde woman approached. "Ms. Hayes, Mr. Blackwood is expecting you. I'm Jessica, his executive assistant." Jessica led her through a labyrinth of white corridors to a set of imposing black doors. "He appreciates punctuality," she whispered, checking her watch with a nod of approval. 8:57. Good. Maxwell Blackwood stood with his back to the door, gazing out at his kingdom below. He turned when Vivian entered, his cool gray eyes appraising her as if she were a commodity on the trading floor. "Ms. Hayes, you came." He gestured to a chair. "Coffee?" "I've had enough, thanks," Vivian said, remaining standing. "What's this about, Mr. Blackwood?" "Please, call me Max." He smiled, a practiced expression that didn't reach his eyes. "No. One calls me Maxwell except my mother and the board of directors when they're displeased." "Fine, Max, what do you want?" He circled his desk, leaning against it casually. "Direct, I like that. So many people waste my time with pleasantries when we both know it's all about the deal." "I'm not here to make a deal," Vivian said. "I just want to know why you invited me here." "I have a problem, Ms. Hayes, and I think you might be the solution." He picked up a tablet, swiping through what appeared to be photographs. "My grandmother's 90th birthday is approaching. The family matriarch, controller of 30% of Blackwood shares, and the only person whose opinion actually matters to me." He turned the tablet to show her an elegant elderly woman with Maxwell's same steel gray eyes. "She's been concerned about my public image. The tabloids call me Manhattan's most heartless bachelor. Not entirely undeserved." He shrugged. "Grandmother has decided I need to show a softer side before she'll sign off on my newest acquisition." Vivian's eyes narrowed. "What does this have to do with me?" "I need someone real. Someone authentic who isn't impressed by my wealth or intimidated by my position." He stepped closer. "Someone who would throw coffee on my car and tell me off in the middle of Fifth Avenue." Understanding dawned on Vivian's face. "You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend? That's your proposition? For 6 weeks. Accompany me to family events, charity galas, be seen in public. Show my grandmother that I'm capable of maintaining a relationship with someone who isn't a supermodel or socialite." "Absolutely not." Vivian headed for the door. "I'd rather work at a fast food restaurant than be your rent-a-girlfriend. I'll pay off your student loans, all of them." Vivian froze, her hand on the doorknob. "What did you say?" "Your student loans, plus rent for a year, and I'll write you a recommendation for any graduate program you wish to apply for." She turned back slowly. "How do you know about my student loans?" Maxwell waved dismissively. "Basic background check. Standard procedure." "That's invasive and creepy." "That's business. But I'm offering a solution to your most pressing problem." He approached her, stopping just close enough to be inappropriate. "Think of it as a business arrangement. 6 weeks of your time in exchange for financial freedom." Vivian's mind raced. Her loans totaled nearly $87,000. Working 3 jobs, it would take her decades to pay them off. What exactly would this entail? Public appearances, dinner with my family, learning enough about each other to be convincing. Nothing physical, beyond basic displays of affection for appearance's sake. And after 6 weeks, we have a public amicable breakup. You're free to go with your debts cleared and a glowing reference. Vivian studied him. Why me? You could hire an actress. Grandmother would spot a professional a mile away. She has an uncanny ability to detect dishonesty. He allowed himself a genuine half-smile. But you, Vivian Hayes, are refreshingly, almost brutally honest. It's what caught my attention yesterday. So you're hiring me because I was rude to you? I'm hiring you because you weren't afraid of me. Do you know how rare that is in my world? Vivian took a deep breath. I need time to think about this. Of course. He returned to his desk. You have until 5 p.m. today. After that, I'll need to explore other options. As she turned to leave, he added, Oh, and Vivian, if you accept, be prepared to move into my penthouse. A convincing relationship requires convincing logistics. The elevator descended as rapidly as it had risen, but Vivian hardly noticed. Her mind was too busy calculating exactly how much her integrity was worth and whether she could afford to say no. This isn't a penthouse, it's a small country, Vivian murmured as Maxwell's private elevator opened directly into his apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a 360-degree view of Manhattan, making the city appear like a toy model. Far below. It's functional, Maxwell replied with casual indifference, shrugging off his suit jacket and handing it to a waiting staff member who seemed to materialize from nowhere. Vivian had called him at 4:58 p.m. with her decision, 2 minutes before his deadline. She had tried to convince herself it was a calculated pause to establish boundaries. In reality, she'd spent the day frantically weighing her options, eventually concluding that no moral high ground was worth $87,000 in student debt. Your quarters are in the East Wing, Maxwell continued, leading her through a living room larger than her entire apartment. I've had Jessica arrange for a suitable wardrobe. I have clothes, Vivian protested. Maxwell's glance spoke volumes. Not for the events we'll be attending. The first is tomorrow night, a charity gala for the Metropolitan Museum. Several board members will be there, including my grandmother. Tomorrow? Vivian stopped abruptly. That's not enough time to prepare. I don't know anything about you, your family, how we supposedly met. Which is why we're having dinner in 30 minutes to establish our backstory. He checked his watch. I've cleared my evening to brief you on the necessary details. How generous of you, Vivian muttered. Maxwell's lips twitched. Sarcasm is fine in private, but in public, try to look at me as if I'm slightly more appealing than a tax audit. I'll do my best, she replied with an exaggerated flutter of eyelashes. He led her to a guest suite that was bigger than her entire apartment. A king-sized bed dominated one wall, while a sitting area with its own fireplace occupied another corner. The bathroom featured a shower with multiple heads and a tub that could accommodate a small swimming competition. This will do, I suppose, Vivian said, attempting to maintain her composure. There's a dossier on the desk with information about me, my family, and our fictional relationship. Review it before dinner. He turned to leave, then paused. The contract is there too. My lawyers prepared it this morning. Standard non-disclosure agreement, terms of payment, duration of our arrangement. You're very efficient. I didn't build Blackwood Enterprises by wasting time. His expression softened fractionally. There's also information about my grandmother, Eleanor Blackwood. She's important to me. For the first time, Vivian glimpsed something beyond the cool, calculated businessman. You really care about her opinion. She raised me after my parents died, he said, the admission seeming to surprise even him. Car accident. I was 8. Vivian's sarcastic retort died on her lips. I'm sorry. Maxwell straightened, mask firmly back in place. Dinner at 7. Wear something from the closet. After he left, Vivian explored her quarters. The walk-in closet was filled with designer clothes in exactly her size, price tags conspicuously, removed but likely totaling more than her yearly income. The dossier on the desk was meticulous, 30 pages detailing Maxwell's biography, business achievements, family connections, and preferences. The fictional story of their meeting was simple but plausible. They'd met at a charity event where Vivian was working, not as a server but as an event coordinator's assistant. He'd been impressed by her efficiency and asked her to coffee. The relationship had progressed naturally over 2 months. Learn this like it's the most important final exam of your life, she told herself, settling in to memorize the details. At dinner, seated at opposite ends of a table that could accommodate 20, Maxwell quizzed her relentlessly. Favorite food? Rare steak, roasted vegetables, You dislike seafood and have an unexpected weakness for apple pie, Vivian answered. Allergies? None for you. I'm allergic to shellfish. That part's actually true. Family? Parents deceased? Raised by Eleanor, who splits her time between the Manhattan townhouse and the Hamptons estate. One younger sister, Charlotte, who runs the Blackwood Foundation. First date? Little Italian place in the village called Marcello's. You ordered the special without looking at the menu, and I was impressed when you spoke to the owner in fluent Italian. Maxwell nodded, appearing satisfied. You're a quick study. I've always had a good memory, useful when you're working multiple jobs and taking night classes. Something flickered in his eyes. Curiosity, perhaps. What were you studying? Environmental law. I want to specialize in corporate accountability. He laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face. So you aspire to sue people like me? People exactly like you, she confirmed with a small smile. Well, at least our conversations will be interesting. He raised his wine glass. To convincing deceptions. As they clinked glasses, Vivian noticed a flash of vulnerability beneath his confident exterior. For just a moment, Maxwell Blackwood looked like a man who'd built walls so high he'd forgotten there was a world outside them. Why does your grandmother think you need a relationship? Vivian asked suddenly. What does proving you can date someone like me have to do with business acquisitions? Maxwell set down his glass carefully. Blackwood started as a family company. My grandfather built it from nothing, but it was Eleanor who transformed it into what it is today. She believes business is about relationships, not just transactions. That empathy is as important as strategy. And she doesn't think you have empathy? His expression hardened. I have a different approach. Efficiency over sentiment. Results over relationships. That explains the Manhattan's Most Heartless Bachelor title. The tabloids exaggerate. I'm not heartless, just focused. Vivian studied him, this man who approached romance like a business merger. Has there ever been anyone real, someone you actually cared about? For a moment, Maxwell looked genuinely startled by the question. Then his expression closed off again. We should review tomorrow's event, he said, changing the subject. The guest list includes several key investors. As he spoke about business strategies and networking opportunities, Vivian wondered what it would take to crack the polished exterior of Maxwell Blackwood, and whether she actually wanted to see what lay beneath. The Metropolitan Museum of Art glowed like a jewel box against the night sky. A red carpet stretched from the street to the grand entrance, lined with photographers and reporters eagerly documenting the arrival of New York's elite. Vivian peered through the tinted window of Maxwell's limousine, her stomach tightening with anxiety. Remember, Maxwell said, adjusting his bow tie, you belong here just as much as anyone else. That's a lovely sentiment, Vivian replied, smoothing the silk of her emerald gown, a Valentino creation that had arrived that morning with a handwritten note from Jessica. But we both know it's not true. Maxwell studied her with unexpected intensity. Actually, it is. This world of privilege and excess? It's largely performance. Half the people here are desperately trying to convince the other half that they belong. A hint of a smile touched his lips. The difference is, you and I know we're acting. Before she could respond, the car door opened. Maxwell stepped out first, then extended his hand. The moment Vivian emerged, camera flashes exploded around them. Mr. Blackwood, over here. Maxwell, who's your date? Look this way, please. Maxwell's arm slid around her waist, his touch firm but not possessive. He leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. Smile like I've just whispered something charming, he murmured. Tilt your head slightly toward mine. Vivian complied, hyper-aware of his proximity. For someone so emotionally distant, Maxwell Blackwood was surprisingly good at physical intimacy, at least the performed kind. Excellent, he approved as they moved forward. Now laugh softly, as if remembering something delightful from earlier. Do you always choreograph your dates this precisely? She asked through her smile. Only the important ones. As they reached the reporters, Maxwell transformed. His usual clipped efficiency gave way to a charismatic ease that Vivian hadn't witnessed before. "Maxwell, who's the mystery woman?" called a reporter from the New York Post. "This is Vivian Hayes," he replied, his British accent somehow more pronounced in public. "We've been seeing each other for a few months now." "Vivian, how did you meet New York's most notorious bachelor?" Maxwell tensed slightly beside her, but Vivian was ready. She'd rehearsed this. "I was coordinating a charity event," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Max kept changing the seating arrangements, driving everyone crazy." She glanced up at him with manufactured affection. "I finally told him if he moved one more place card, I'd seat him in the kitchen with the dishwashers." Maxwell's laugh seemed genuinely surprised. "She's the only person who's ever threatened me and gotten a dinner invitation instead of a severance package." The reporters ate it up, scribbling notes as Maxwell guided her inside. "That was perfect," he said once they were beyond earshot. "The right mix of authenticity and charm. My grandmother will hear about that exchange before we even reach her table." The museum's great hall had been transformed into a fantasy of white orchids and silver candelabras. New York's wealthiest and most influential circulated beneath the soaring ceilings, their jewels catching the light like constellations. "There she is," Maxwell said, nodding toward a striking white-haired woman holding court near a Greek statue. "Eleanor Blackwood, remember? She likes Earl Grey tea with a slice of lemon, not milk. Collects first editions of British mysteries. Graduated top of her class from Wellesley in 1956, when women were still expected to pursue Mrs. degrees instead of BAs. Served on 12 corporate boards before retiring to focus on the family business. Believes philanthropy should be about systemic change, not vanity projects." Vivian took a deep breath. "And she can spot insincerity from a mile away, so I should be myself. Just the version of myself who's fallen for her grandson." Maxwell's eyebrows rose slightly. "I'm impressed. I told you I have a good memory. It's not just memory. You understand what matters to her." Something unreadable flickered in his eyes. "That's rare." As they approached Eleanor Blackwood, Vivian felt Maxwell straighten beside her, like a soldier coming to attention. The subtle change spoke volumes about their relationship. "Grandmother," Maxwell said, bending to kiss her cheek. "You look wonderful." "Save the flattery for your board members, Maxwell," Eleanor replied, though her eyes twinkled. Her accent was pure Upper East Side aristocracy, each word precisely enunciated. "And introduce me to this young woman who's apparently convinced you to emerge from that glass tower of yours. Vivian Hayes. This is my grandmother, Eleanor Blackwood." "Grandmother." "This is Vivian." Eleanor's handshake was firm, her assessment shrewd. "So you're the one who's been occupying my grandson's time. I was beginning to think he'd invented you." "It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Blackwood," Vivian said. "Your work with educational initiatives for young women is inspiring." Eleanor's eyebrows rose. "You're familiar with my foundation work?" "I benefited from a similar scholarship program for first-generation college students. Without it, I wouldn't have been able to pursue environmental law." "Environmental law?" Eleanor looked delighted. "How fascinating. Maxwell, you didn't mention your Vivian was an attorney." "Still in training," Vivian corrected. "One more semester to go." "In my experience, the most valuable perspectives often come from those still asking questions rather than those convinced they have all the answers." Eleanor gave her grandson a pointed look. "Wouldn't you agree, Maxwell?" "I've found Vivian's question enlightening," he replied diplomatically. Eleanor laughed, a rich, full sound. "I'll bet you have. Maxwell surrounds himself with people who nod and say yes. It must be refreshing for him to hear a different word occasionally." "Grandmother," Maxwell began, but Eleanor waved him off. "Go fetch us some champagne, darling. I want to speak with Vivian privately." After he reluctantly departed, Eleanor's expression sharpened. "Now, tell me how you really met my grandson. And please spare me the sanitized version you've no doubt prepared for the society columns." Vivian hesitated, panic fluttering in her chest. The dossier hadn't prepared her for direct interrogation from Eleanor. The truth, dear. I've spent 89 years developing an excellent radar for nonsense. Making a split-second decision, Vivian opted for a version closer to reality. I ran in front of his car on Fifth Avenue. Coffee went everywhere. He was furious. I was late for work. We argued in the middle of the street. To her surprise, Eleanor burst out laughing. Now that I believe. And what did you think of him in that moment of authentic introduction? That he was arrogant, entitled, and probably hadn't heard the word no in at least a decade. Eleanor's eyes sparkled with approval. And yet here you are. He's more complicated than I initially thought. All the Blackwood men are. His grandfather was the same way. Prickly exterior hiding a depth most people never bothered to discover. Eleanor took Vivian's hand. Maxwell doesn't let people in easily. Not since his parents died. He mentioned that, Vivian said softly. It must have been terrible for him, and for you. Something softened in Eleanor's face. It was. He went from a talkative, exuberant child to a solemn little man overnight, determined to control everything because the most important thing had been taken from him without warning. Vivian felt a strange ache in her chest. That explains a lot. It explains, but it doesn't excuse. I've watched him build walls so high even I can barely see over them anymore. Eleanor's gaze was direct. Which is why I'm curious about what exactly he sees in you, Ms. Hayes. Vivian swallowed hard. Perhaps the same thing I see in him. And what might that be? Meeting the older woman's eyes, Vivian answered with unexpected honesty. Someone fighting to reconcile who they are with who they think they need to be. Eleanor studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Well done, my dear. Perfect. Answer. Before Vivian could respond, Maxwell returned with 3 champagne flutes. I see you've survived the Inquisition, he said lightly, though his eyes searched Vivian's face. Your grandmother was just sharing some stories about you as a child, Vivian improvised. Something about a frog in the bathtub of the Hamptons house? Maxwell's expression was priceless, a mixture of horror and confusion. Eleanor smoothly picked up the fabricated thread. He was determined to create a proper habitat, complete with lily pads from my prize garden, she elaborated. The housekeeper nearly had a heart attack. Maxwell recovered quickly. I was an enterprising child. You were a menace, Eleanor corrected fondly. Now I must circulate. The Harrington Foundation expects me to charm at least $1 million out of this crowd tonight. She squeezed Vivian's hand. Save me a dance, Maxwell. And bring this delightful creature to Sunday brunch at the townhouse. As Eleanor glided away, Maxwell turned to Vivian with genuine curiosity. What really happened? You look like you've either passed a crucial test or committed a felony. Both, possibly, Vivian replied. Your grandmother asked for the truth about how we met. Maxwell stiffened. And you told her a version of it. The coffee, the argument, but not the arrangement. Vivian sipped her champagne. She seemed to approve, oddly enough. He relaxed marginally. Grandmother appreciates authenticity even when it's uncomfortable. His eyes scanned the room. We should mingle. Several board members are watching us with unseemly interest. The next few hours passed in a blur of introductions and carefully calibrated interactions. Maxwell guided her through the social labyrinth with surprising attentiveness, always keeping her involved in conversations, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. To anyone watching, they appeared to be a couple deeply attuned to each other's needs, she softening his sharp edges, he elevating her with his confidence. It was all performance, Vivian reminded herself. Yet she couldn't deny the flutter in her stomach when he pulled her onto the dance floor as a string quartet began playing Gershwin's The Man I Love. I didn't know billionaires could dance, she murmured as he led her flawlessly through the steps. British boarding school, he explained. Ballroom dancing was required, supposedly built character. Did it? It taught me that following the prescribed steps doesn't always prepare you for the improvisation required outside the ballroom. His hand tightened slightly at her waist. You're a natural, though. Community center classes in high school. My mom insisted. The memory brought an unexpected pang. She said everyone should know how to dance, regardless of circumstances. Something in her tone caught his attention. Your mother sounds wise. She was, Vivian said quietly. Cancer 3 years ago. Maxwell missed a step, the first imperfection in his otherwise flawless performance. I didn't know. It wasn't in the dossier, she said, attempting lightness, not relevant to our arrangement. He studied her face. I disagree. For a moment, they simply moved together, the practiced steps creating an illusion of harmony between two people from entirely different worlds. This charade, Maxwell said suddenly, his voice low. It's convincing because there's truth woven through it. The best deceptions always contain elements of authenticity. Is that a business strategy? Or a personal philosophy? His smile held unexpected melancholy. Both, perhaps. He guided her into a turn, their bodies moving closer together than strictly necessary. You understand loss. It changes how you move through the world. It does, she agreed, surprised by his insight. But differently for each person. How did it change you? The question caught her off guard, intimate in a way their physical proximity wasn't. It made me impatient with pretense. Life's too short for anything but the truth. She met his gaze. How did it change you? For several beats, Maxwell said nothing, his expression unreadable. Then, with clinical precision, he answered, It taught me that attachment is a vulnerability best avoided. Emotional distance is the most efficient protection against pain. The honesty was startling, a crack in his perfect facade. Before Vivian could respond, the music ended. Maxwell stepped back, the moment broken. Congratulations, he said, his business mask firmly back in place. You've survived your first high society event. The board members are suitably impressed. My grandmother is enchanted, and tomorrow's society pages will undoubtedly declare us Manhattan's new power couple. But as they moved through the rest of the evening, Vivian found herself watching Maxwell with new eyes. Behind his practiced charm and calculated efficiency, she glimpsed something she hadn't expected. A lonely boy who had learned to mistake isolation for strength. And for the first time since their arrangement began, she wondered if 6 weeks would be enough to untangle the complex web they were weaving, and whether either of them would emerge from it unchanged. 5 weeks had transformed Vivian's life into something unrecognizable. She'd attended galas and charity auctions, weekend retreats in the Hamptons, and Sunday brunches at Eleanor's townhouse. She'd mastered the art of small talk with senators and tech moguls, learned which fork to use for each course, and grown accustomed to having her every need anticipated by Maxwell's efficient staff. Most surprisingly, she'd grown accustomed to Maxwell himself. Now, sitting in his sleek home office reviewing contracts for his latest acquisition, the one that had sparked this entire charade, Vivian realized how comfortable their routine had become. The environmental impact statement is inadequate, she said, marking a section with a yellow highlighter. If you acquire this company with these practices in place, you're inheriting significant liability. Maxwell looked up from his laptop. I have a team of environmental lawyers who've cleared it. Your team missed this. Vivian pointed to a clause buried in the appendix. Their waste disposal protocols violate 3 EPA regulations that were updated last quarter. When these violations come to light, and they will, the fines alone would erase your projected first-year profits. Maxwell studied the passage, then reached for his phone. Jessica, get Roberts on the line. Tell him I need a complete reassessment of the Westfield environmental compliance, with particular attention to the updated EPA regulations. He hung up and gave Vivian an appreciative nod. Good catch. Just doing my part to protect the Blackwood Empire? She replied with a hint of irony. Is that what we're calling it now? His lips curved in what Vivian had come to recognize as a genuine smile, rare in the beginning, increasingly frequent as the weeks passed. And here I thought you were sharpening your skills to eventually bring that empire to its knees. Girl can do both. Maxwell leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that had once made her uncomfortable, but now felt familiar. You'd be an asset to any legal team. When this is over, I'd be happy to connect you with some firms that align with your ethical priorities. When this is over. The words hung between them, a reminder of what they both seemed determined to forget. That their relationship had an expiration date. In just 1 week, their arrangement would conclude. The contract would be fulfilled. Maxwell would acquire his company with Eleanor's blessing, and Vivian would return to her old life, albeit debt-free. The thought left a hollow feeling in her chest. I should finish packing, she said abruptly, rising from the desk. Eleanor's birthday weekend at the Hamptons estate starts tomorrow. Vivian. Maxwell's voice stopped her at the door. My grandmother has requested that we arrive early, just the two of us, tonight. Why? She didn't say. But with Eleanor, it's best not to question. Vivian nodded, trying to ignore the flutter of nervousness. In the weeks since their first meeting, she'd grown genuinely fond of Eleanor. The thought of maintaining their deception directly, without the buffer of social events and other guests, felt increasingly wrong. I'll be ready by 6, she said. The drive to the Hamptons was uncharacteristically quiet. Maxwell worked on his tablet while Vivian watched the landscape change from urban to rural, the sprawling estates growing more impressive as they neared the coast. After nearly an hour of silence, Maxwell set his work aside. You're unusually quiet tonight. Just thinking about the future, Vivian admitted. After? He turned to face her fully. Having second thoughts about returning to your previous life? Not exactly, but it will be an adjustment. She chose her words carefully. These past weeks have been educational. Is that all they've been? The question hung between them, laden with implications neither seemed ready to address. What happens after our breakup? Vivian asked instead. Do you find another woman to convince Eleanor of your reformed character? Or is one fake relationship enough to secure your business objectives? Something hardened in Maxwell's expression. Our arrangement has always been clear. Once the acquisition is complete, we part ways amicably. You return to your life financially unburdened. I return to mine. Right back to being Manhattan's most heartless bachelor. I never claimed this experience would change me, Vivian. But it had, she thought. In subtle ways neither of them acknowledged aloud. The way he now asked about her day before diving into business. How he'd started joining her for breakfast, rather than having his assistant deliver agenda items over. Coffee. The night he'd found her reading in the library at 3 a.m. during a bout of insomnia, and sat with her for hours, discussing everything from climate policy to childhood memories. Small changes that amounted to... what, exactly? The car turned through ornate iron gates and proceeded down a tree-lined drive to the Blackwood estate, a sprawling Georgian mansion overlooking the Atlantic. Unlike the sleek modernity of Maxwell's penthouse, the family home embraced traditional elegance with ivy-covered walls and perfectly manicured gardens. Eleanor greeted them on the front steps, elegant as always in tailored slacks and a cashmere sweater. There you are. I was beginning to think you'd decided to skip the birthday festivities entirely. And risk your disappointment? Never. Maxwell kissed her cheek. Happy birthday, grandmother. It's not my birthday until Sunday. She corrected. But thank you for indulging my request for an early arrival. She linked her arm through Vivian's. I've asked the staff to serve dinner on the terrace. The sunset over the water is particularly beautiful tonight. Dinner was an intimate affair, just the three of them beneath a canopy of fairy lights. Eleanor regaled Vivian with stories of Maxwell's childhood, his science experiments gone awry, his determination to learn sailing one summer, his brief but passionate attempt to become a rock musician at 14. He was quite good on the guitar, Eleanor insisted, but apparently investment banking offered more appropriate outlets for teenage rebellion in our family. I still play occasionally, Maxwell admitted, surprising Vivian. The acoustics in The penthouse library are quite good. You never mentioned that, Vivian said. There are many things about me you don't know, he replied, his eyes holding hers for a moment too long. After dinner, Eleanor excused herself, claiming fatigue. You two enjoy the evening. Perhaps a walk on the beach, the moon is nearly full. Left alone, Maxwell and Vivian found themselves following Eleanor's suggestion, removing their shoes to walk along the private stretch of shoreline. The rhythmic crash of waves filled the silence between them. Your grandmother is remarkable, Vivian finally said. You're fortunate to have her. I am. Maxwell's voice softened, though I'm not always the grandson she deserves. She knows you love her. Does she? He stopped, looking out at the moonlit water. I've spent most of my adult life focused on building the business, expanding what she and my grandfather created. I thought that was how I showed my appreciation. And now? Now I'm beginning to understand there might be more effective ways to honor their legacy. He turned to her. You've changed her, you know. She's more animated these past weeks than I've seen her in years. I haven't done anything special. You've been authentic, given her something real in a world of performance and calculation. Maxwell's expression was unreadable in the moonlight. You've been good for her, for both of us. The admission hung between them like a tangible thing. Vivian felt her heart quicken. Maxwell, we should head back. He interrupted. Whatever moment had been building suddenly broken. It's getting cold. The next morning, Vivian found Eleanor in the garden, supervising arrangements for the weekend's festivities. Ah, Vivian, just the person I wanted to see. Eleanor dismissed the event planner with a wave. Walk with me, dear. They strolled through the rose garden, Eleanor occasionally stopping to deadhead a bloom or adjust a support. I want to thank you, the older woman said finally. For what? For bringing my grandson back to me. Eleanor's keen eyes studied Vivian's face. Maxwell has always been brilliant at business but remarkably obtuse about matters of the heart. It's been refreshing to see him with someone who challenges that particular blindness. Vivian felt her chest tighten with guilt. Mrs. Blackwood, Eleanor, please. Eleanor, I think you might have misunderstood. Your arrangement? Eleanor finished, her expression knowing. I may be old, my dear, but I'm not a fool. 6 weeks is a rather specific timeline for a romance, don't you think? Particularly one that conveniently aligns with my birthday and the Westfield acquisition. Vivian stopped, stunned. You knew? All along? Not immediately. But I've watched Maxwell negotiate his way through life for decades. I recognize his handiwork. She patted Vivian's hand. Don't look so stricken, I'm not angry. I've been lying to you. Have you? About your background, your aspirations, your opinions on climate policy and corporate responsibility? Eleanor shook her head. No, I think those have been refreshingly honest. The nature of your relationship with Maxwell may have begun as a charade, but what's developed between you is quite real. We have a contract, Vivian said weakly. Contracts can be renegotiated. Eleanor smiled. That's business lesson number 1. It's not that simple. Love rarely is. Eleanor reached out to touch a particularly vibrant rose. Do you know why I insisted on approving Maxwell's acquisition? It wasn't about the business strategy. The boy could run circles around me in that department by the time he was 25. Then why? Because I watched him turn himself into a machine after his parents died, precise, efficient, and utterly isolated. I wanted him to prove he still had the capacity to connect with another human being before I signed off on expanding his empire. Eleanor's eyes were suddenly fierce. A person who can't form meaningful bonds shouldn't hold that much power over others' lives. Vivian was speechless, the implications of Eleanor's words sinking in. The arrangement may have begun as his idea, Eleanor continued, but something unexpected has happened, hasn't it? For both of you. Before Vivian could respond, her phone chimed with a message from Maxwell, asking her to meet him in his grandfather's study. She found him pacing before floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, his usual composure noticeably absent. "Close the door," he said without preamble. Vivian complied, apprehension building. "What's wrong?" "Our contract." He gestured to his laptop. "I've been reviewing it in preparation for next week's conclusion, and I find the terms suddenly unsatisfactory." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so uncharacteristic it alarmed her. "I'd like to propose an amendment." "What kind of amendment?" "An extension." Vivian's heart skipped. "For how long?" Maxwell met her gaze directly. "Indefinitely." The word hung in the air between them. Vivian struggled to understand. "You want to continue our arrangement? The public appearances, the pretense?" "No." He stepped closer. "I want to renegotiate. New terms, no pretense." "I don't understand." "Yes, you do." His voice softened. "You've spent 6 weeks analyzing every contract detail, questioning every clause. You're too intelligent not to see what's happening here." "Say it," she demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. "No business terminology, no euphemisms, just say what you mean." Maxwell took a deep breath. "I'm falling in love with you. Not as part of our arrangement, not to please my grandmother or secure a business deal. Simply because you've dismantled every defense I've constructed over the past 20 years without even trying." Vivian stared at him, her heart pounding. That wasn't part of the contract. Hence the need for renegotiation. A hint of his old confidence returned. "I'm prepared to offer very favorable terms." Despite everything, Vivian laughed. "You're impossible. Even now you're approaching this like a business deal. Old habits." His smile was self-deprecating. "But I'm willing to learn new ones. If you're willing to teach me. And if I'm not? If I walk away next week as planned, then I honor our original agreement. Your loans are paid. Your future is secured. We part as friends, I hope." His expression grew serious. "But I'd be remiss as a businessman if I didn't explore all possible avenues before accepting such a significant loss." "Is that what I'd be? A loss?" Maxwell closed the distance between them, his hands coming to rest lightly on her shoulders. "You would be the one calculation I got catastrophically wrong. The variable I failed to account for. The risk I didn't properly assess." "That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me," Vivian said dryly, though her pulse raced at his proximity. "I told you I need to learn new habits." She studied his face. The face she'd come to know so well over these weeks. The sharp intelligence in his eyes, the slight asymmetry of his smile, the barely perceptible scar at his temple from a childhood sailing accident. "I have terms of my own," she said finally. His eyebrows rose. "I'm listening." "I finished law school. On my own merit, not with Blackwood connections." "Agreed." "I pursue my career goals, including potentially suing corporations like yours when they violate environmental regulations." A smile tugged at his lips. "Potential conflict of interest but negotiable. And most importantly," Vivian continued, "no more walls, no more emotional efficiency, no more treating feelings like inconvenient disruptions to your business plan. That's a significant restructuring of my operational model." His voice was light, but his eyes were serious. "Deal breaker," she said firmly. Maxwell considered her for a long moment. "Counter-proposal. I commit to gradual but consistent progress on emotional availability, with quarterly reviews and measurable benchmarks." Vivian laughed despite herself. "You're incorrigible." "I prefer adaptable." His hands moved from her shoulders to frame her face. "Final offer, Ms. Hayes. I promise to try every day to be worthy of whatever this is between us. No contracts, no arrangements, just us. Finding our way together." "That," Vivian said softly, "sounds like terms I could accept." When he kissed her, there was no audience to perform for, no deception to maintain. Just the simple, startling truth of two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances. Later that evening, as guests began arriving for the weekend celebration, Eleanor found them on the terrace, hands intertwined as they watched the sunset. "I see negotiations concluded successfully," she observed with a knowing smile. Maxwell looked at his grandmother suspiciously. "You orchestrated this entire situation, didn't you? The acquisition approval, the relationship requirement, it was all a setup." "Don't be ridiculous, darling. I merely created favorable conditions and waited for you to make the logical decision." Eleanor patted his cheek affectionately. "It's what any good businesswoman would do." As Eleanor moved away to greet her guests, Maxwell shook his head in amazement. "I've been outmaneuvered by my own grandmother." "She's quite the strategist," Vivian agreed. "Must run in the family." "Along with an appreciation for women who aren't afraid to challenge us." He squeezed her hand. "I should warn you, a relationship with the Blackwood isn't always easy." Vivian smiled, thinking of the journey that had brought them to this moment, from a coffee-splattered Bentley on Fifth Avenue to a heart open despite its owner's best defenses. "The best deals," she replied, echoing his words from weeks ago, "always involve a certain amount of risk." As Maxwell led her toward the gathering, Vivian reflected that some arrangements, even those that begin as calculated business transactions, have a way of transforming into something far more valuable than either party could have predicted. Something that, unlike the fortunes and empires built by the Blackwood family over generations, couldn't be measured, controlled, or contained in neat contractual clauses, something for which, fortunately, there was no price. Epilogue. 1 year later, Vivian stood in the doorway of Maxwell's, now their penthouse library, watching as he played guitar for Eleanor, who applauded enthusiastically at the conclusion of the impromptu concert. "Bravo! You've still got it, my boy." "Don't encourage him," Vivian said, entering with a tray of tea. "Last week he was serenading me at 3 in the morning because inspiration struck." "The creative process can't be scheduled," Maxwell defended, setting aside the guitar to help with the tea service, a small gesture that would have been unthinkable in the Maxwell she'd first met. "How goes the environmental initiative?" Eleanor asked as Vivian poured. "Surprisingly well. We've got 10 major corporations signed on to the enhanced compliance standards." Vivian glanced at Maxwell. "Including Blackwood Enterprises, which has somehow become the model of corporate environmental responsibility." "Amazing what proper motivation can accomplish," Maxwell remarked, his eyes warm as they met hers. The Blackwood Environmental Accountability Project had been their compromise, a way for Vivian to pursue her passion for environmental law while working with corporations rather than against them. The initiative, funded by the Blackwood Foundation but operated independently, was already making waves in the business community. "And the wedding plans?" Eleanor inquired innocently. "Still under negotiation," Maxwell replied with a smile. "Vivian refuses to let me hire an event planner." "Because you'd turn it into the corporate event of the century," Vivian countered. "I want something authentic." "Compromise is the foundation of any successful partnership," Eleanor observed, "both business and personal." As their conversation continued, Vivian marveled at how thoroughly her life had transformed since that fateful morning on Fifth Avenue. She'd completed law school, launched a groundbreaking environmental initiative, and fallen in love with a man who had once been the embodiment of everything she opposed. Maxwell, too, had changed. The sharp edges remained. She wouldn't want him any other way, but they no longer cut quite so deeply. He'd learned to balance efficiency with emotion, strategy with spontaneity. He still approached life with a businessman's precision, but his calculations now included variables like joy, connection, and love. Some would call it a fairy tale, the billionaire and the barista, finding unexpected love despite their differences. But Vivian knew better. What they'd built wasn't a fantasy, but something far more valuable. A partnership forged through honesty, strengthened by challenge and sustained by the conscious choice, made each day to see and accept each other exactly as they were. Not a fiction created for public consumption, but a private truth they continued to discover together, with no expiration date and no final payment due. The best deal either of them had ever made.